Hey, Paisan.
Hey.
What's the matter for you?
Oh. Why? I'm okay. How you doing?
You look a little down with that iPod thing you got there.
Yeah, I'm really mad about the iPod. First of all, with the Italian accents there, first of all, I want to just ask my brother, do you approve of those Italian accents? I mean, should we keep doing them? There you go. All right. I'm in a bit of a mood today because this week I found out that Apple has discontinued the iPod Touch, the only iPod they were still manufacturing. Now, I personally was a big iPod Classic fan, because it only played music and that was it. And I just want this device around for playing music. And though the iPod Touch had the added benefit of, it had Bluetooth on it, you can play like podcasts, and it had the internet on it too. But it didn't have a phone, which is great because as listeners to this podcast know, I really don't ever use the phone because I don't have any friends because I don't like people. so I stay in my house all day listening to music. But now they've discontinued the iPod Touch. The thing that makes me so mad, oh man, I don't even know where to start. The thing that makes me so mad about that is the iPod Touch or the iPod in general, was primarily for music. That's why it was invented, so you could carry music around with you. And this goes all the way back to the Sony Walkman with the cassette tapes that we had in the, it was the 80s or the late 70s? When did that come out?
1979, I believe that came out.
Oh, wow, yeah, okay. And then that went to the Discman, and those always skipped. And then we had the iPod Touch, and you had posted a picture of your old iPod Classic with the actual buttons on it.
I pre-ordered that. I think when I got the first one when it came out, the 5 gigabyte moving hard disk brick for your pocket. Yep.
Yeah, that was a real brick, that thing. It had a giant hard drive in it.
And I think it still works. Yeah. I did test it out a few years ago, but then I realized I don't have a computer with a FireWire jack anymore. So I don't know where you would plug it. You'd need an adapter or something,
Yeah, I need the. I still have one of those 30-pin wires around somewhere. I have 3 iPod Classics. The earliest one I got was the 60 gigabyte ones, and I always had an issue with them in the beginning, especially with yours, because they only played songs, and I'm an album person, as you know. I mean, because I want, if I'm listening also to classical music, you're going to want these 4-movement symphonies to continue to the end. So I was really into those, and there used to be a gap between tracks, and I always hated that, but they finally fixed that, and now everything is great. And now they discontinued it. So what do they want us to do? They want us to get an iPhone. But what's the iPhone for? It's for communication. It's for internet use. And it's almost like Apple is saying music isn't important anymore. And I beg to differ. I mean, it's really my whole life. It's that I read a lot of books. That's basically what I do. So
it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, you can buy a music player, and various companies make these ones in high res. Of course, Neil Young had his Pono player or whatever, and these other companies make it. In the name of convenience, this Swiss Army knife of communications and digital things has laid to rest lots of other cool products that we had, like the digital camera. Who buys a compact digital camera anymore? Almost no one, because they think that the smartphone is good enough, and it's good enough for most things, taking pictures of your lunch or your cat that nobody wants to see, but it's not as good as a real camera. And it's too bad that
it does take some pretty high quality pictures.
Yeah, it does. But the development of these specialized devices is come grinding to a halt, or because of the sales. You won't see young people with a music.
Right. That's a real shame. That's all we did when we were younger, was listen to music. And we would get together and talk about new albums and things like that,
I have this nice little Sony recorder. They don't make it anymore. It'll even record in 24-bit high res, but I use it for recording gigs, other things. And you can...
Right, I've seen that thing. I've come out.
And I took it out, and, a young guy, like around 18, 19, so he said, "Wow, that's huge." I mean, it's about 3/4 of the size of a pack of cigarettes, and you can get a really decent live recording out of it, And I just thought, well, okay,
Yeah,
if that's huge.
We're at the mercy of young people's whims, which we kind of knew would happen because that happened to us when we were younger. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like they're just saying, okay, music isn't our thing anymore. And the thing about the iPod Touch was it was also compatible with Apple things, and they would support it, and it was just all really easy, and it was great.
Well, what I think it is, they probably weren't selling as many of them.
Yeah.
And then what I don't like about the kind of Apple approach, it's like with their Apple Music, right? It's basically a loss leader to sell more devices.
Right.
They don't care if they make money on streaming. And I think that Apple Music and Amazon are looking to kind of squeeze out Spotify and other,
you had mentioned.
other platforms that actually are focusing more on the content. I think Apple just does it because they can. And that's why you can't play Apple Music on, any other kind of device, unlike what you can do with, have Deezer built into a network player. And, you're not going to see that with Apple Music. So as much as I enjoy Apple products, I have a lot of them.
I like, but I feel like they're running out of ideas, I feel like, because what's their big product is still the iPhone? I mean, how old is that thing?
Well, because you're supposed to buy a new one every year, Michael.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Also, they say I read people online saying, "Oh, I've never seen anybody using an iPod Touch, so I guess I'm nobody now."
Oh.
But
it looks just like an iPhone. Anyway.
But here's the thing: people use an iPhone, but who uses it as a phone? Nobody.
They just
use it
text
as
on it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they should get rid of the iPhone. They should. And just make like a small version of the iPad and call it the Super Mini iPad. And that would be the same thing as an iPod Touch, basically.
Right.
Because nobody uses the phone. There are all these apps that you can use that on the on the iPad anyway to talk to people. Yeah, it's really crazy. They should discontinue the iPhone. There, I've said it. You want to be bold, Apple? That's what you should do.
You know what I think you need? Did you see that? And when you sent me that ad, there was the next ad under that. And it said why you should be using your smart watch as your music player. So I think, that's in your future, an iPhone and an Apple Watch. Yeah.
Well, wearing like a player like on your wrist actually isn't a bad idea. But the whole, I've never gotten into the idea of having the time on your wrist. I mean, I don't understand that. Why would you want that?
I like that.
I don't know.
It organizes my life, but I do it with little mechanical gears. So.
Do you actually have an Apple Watch?
No. I would never have a smartwatch. No, I have all mechanical watches, a whole box of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, because then you got this watch on your left arm, and then your shirt sleeve has to be. You have to use the other button because it won't fit under your sleeve or whatever.
It's all part of my retro vibe, man.
It just seems really weird. Speaking of retro vibes, these people online who are saying things like, "Oh, the iPod Touch, it's so old, they should get rid of it." These people listen to vinyl records. What are they talking about?
Yeah.
Talking about old. God.
It's an upside-down world out there.
It is an upside-down world.
Anyway.
But here we are to put it up right.
Adult music.
Yeah.
That's what you're listening to.
The music adults should be listening to.
This is the podcast with music for the mature mind. And this is episode 63.
Wow.
Here every week, bringing you around 6 new recordings, mostly in classical and jazz, some other surprises, and commentary on all things related to making, listening to, and
we should say
music.
Our names, by the way.
That's
who are
the
you?
person without an iPhone. Over there is Mike.
That's me. I'm Mike. Okay.
And this is Russ over here.
And that's Russ with the suave voice over there.
The suave voice over here.
Yeah.
And, episode 63. Before we get into it, I actually have some smartphone-related news. Before I get to that, I want to remind all of our listeners that in the episode description, you're going to find links to Spotify and Apple Music for the music that we'll talk about. So if you want to listen to that before or after you listen to the podcast, it's all right there, just a click away. Also, at the top of the description, you can get all the music in one long playlist that we put on our preferred streaming platform, Deezer. CD quality sound, nice catalog for classical and jazz. You can also check out the podcast. It's on Deezer as well. Just look up Adult Music Podcast. And if you can't see the full description with the links and information on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, you can always come to our host site, which is Podbean, Podbean, and all the links for the episodes are there. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you listen to us on. Take a moment, give us a ranking, give us 5 stars.
Yeah, give us
ranking.
a 5-star review. You don't have to give a review. Just give us 5 stars because it helps us in the algorithms, please.
There's mystical algorithms that bring us above the K-pop podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. And that helps us get listed in the browsing category recommendations. We've been near the top of Podbean for a couple of weeks. We float in and out of Apple, but we always enjoy getting new listeners. You can also see the podcast on Facebook. We have a page there. Look up Adult Music Podcast. You can see our handsome faces there, all the past episodes, and usually put up some amusing links or videos of the music that we're going to have.
Yeah, we've been posting there lately.
Yeah, I've got 2 for this week's jazz there, and you've got your CDs up there, and a little prelude to the iPod rant.
If I was sensible, I would just, like you, listen to these things on Deezer first and then, buy the CDs later if I like them. But I just buy the CDs because I just like having CDs to listen to. I really enjoy that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Nothing wrong. Well, there is something wrong.
Yeah,
because I don't really have the income to be able to do this. But I do it anyway because you only live once. Right. Anyway.
And other than the Facebook page, if you want to contact us directly, any comments or questions, we'd be happy to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. And I'd like to give a special welcome to our new listeners on Samsung podcasts. I guess this is a feature that's part of their free media app on the Galaxy phones. And they've just added podcasts to that. So I put us in there through the Podbean app. And we've gotten lots of downloads through Samsung this week. So
yeah, thank you for that, everybody.
Yeah, new listeners, welcome. Happy to have you here. And we've also just signed on to Podchaser and iHeartRadio.
Oh, I know some of iHeartRadio's podcasts. I've heard a few of them.
I can't think of anything else that we're not on now. So hopefully we'll be getting some new listeners who use those other platforms. And welcome.
So I was thinking of your, hey, what's the matter you? Because it reminded me of that song from the 70s, like "Shut Up in Your Face." You remember that one?
Yeah. I think I got that one from the old Bugs Bunny skit.
Oh. Hey, what's the matter you?
What's the matter for you? Give me my presents, my cacciatore too, something like that.
There's a guy Luigi also on The Simpsons who does it. Hey, I'm making a pizza, Yeah. Anyway, the reason we're doing this today is because we have an Italian theme. As people who have seen us on Facebook would know, we posted a few things about that. And it's just all Italian music this week.
That's right, 100%.
Yeah. And that's usually a good thing. And it pretty much was this week, too. It was all good. Some of it was better than others, I thought. But we'll get to that as it comes down. All right. Now, before we get into the music, we have another segment of musical necrology this week. And musical necrology now has a theme. So, Russ, would you play that theme, please?
Let's roll it.
Okay, now what you just heard is the melody, or the opening melody for the Dies Irae, Gregorian chant that's used in the Catholic church mass for the dead. And if you listen to classical music, that should be part of your musical vocabulary, because it's an important motif in a lot of works. You hear it a lot. If you listen to, for example, Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique, in the fourth movement, it comes up, and whenever you hear it, it means death. Basically, it's a signal of death. I think it was also used in it was also used ad nauseum in that monstrous piece we heard on the Shostakovich recording, right? Who the Scottish composer? I can't remember his name now.
Yeah.
Oh boy, he really beat it to death. But you know, but you'll often hear it as like a signal of death, and especially 19th century music, death comes up as a theme a lot. They were really into that. If you think about like heavy metal today, like you know, a lot of the or death metal, some of the themes they have, and you're wondering, gee, why would you make music about death? Well, there you go. I mean, it still exists today. It's just in a different kind of music.
Yeah, there's no copyright on that because I recorded it in 10 seconds on the piano. I had learned it back in seminary school, so.
Right, and it's 1,500 years old, so the composer is long dead. We actually do know who wrote that melody, by the way, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I could find out. I actually have it in a note somewhere, but I didn't write it down.
Anyway, who died?
Teresa Berganza died this week. She was a Spanish mezzo-soprano. She was Spanish, and she died on May 13th, 2 days ago. Well, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, we're recording on the evening of the 15th in Japan, which is pretty much the morning of the 15th in the U.S. So she was 89 years old, so a good long life. A lot of these opera singers live for a really long time.
They must get a lot of oxygen in their system.
That must be it. It's the breathing. But they also get a lot of food. You know, they have that. Somebody once described Pavarotti as having a room-filling voice and stage-filling girth, which is kind of goes with the territory.
He did.
Berganza wasn't. She didn't have stage-filling girth. She was. She kept okay. She sang a lot of Italian opera, and she was one of her greatest roles was Carmen, Bizet's Carmen, a very, very sexy role with one of the great arias of all time. So rest in peace, Teresa Berganza. We don't cover opera at all, really, on this podcast. I'm thinking if I could get somebody who likes opera a lot, we could talk about one opera recording a week. I would be willing to do that, but that would be another podcast because I think it takes too much time. There's so many voices, and it takes a long time to listen to an opera.
I'll have to explain,
Yeah, so we're kind of limiting ourselves to the occasional vocal album. So. Of which we have none this week, surprisingly, in spite of having an Italian theme. Much Italian music is based on melody. That's the great Italian gift to the world is melody. They're very can I say, being American or Italian American, are a very melodic people.
I've always thought of you as a melodic guy.
Yeah, I am melodic.
Among other things that
I'm always among other things. Yeah, neurotic, melodic. Psychotic. I got all the icks. the ladies just think of me as ick.
Ick. Yeah. You're such an icky guy.
All right. Anyway, yeah, that's adult music humor right there. We're one step above science humor here. Okay, or mathematician humor. Actually, musician humor is pretty bad. I've heard a lot of like music scholars have like these terrible jokes that they tell. So there you go. You won't see me on the comedy stage anytime soon. Anyway, so we have we usually start with classical music. We start in as far back in time as we can, and that week that's going to mean that we're going to listen to can I call this Baroque? It's more in the Galant style, cello sonatas by two brothers named Giovanni and Antonio Maria Bononcini. And this is performed by Accademia Ottoboni, directed and solo cello by Marco Ceccato. And that's on the French Alpha label. Okay, so Bononcini is not really one of those names that most people are going to know, unless you listen to vocal music, because they're pretty famous for their vocal music.
Sounds like a condiment to me or something.
A condiment?
Can I have some Bononcini with that?
Yeah, put some more Bononcini in this. I think a lot of Italian names do. So there you go. All right, so the Bonucchini brothers, Giovanni was the older one, and he was 7 years older than Antonio Maria. They call him Antonio Maria, not just Antonio. I don't know why. Huh. But Antonio Maria was 7 years younger than him, and he died 21 years before Giovanni. So Giovanni was the longer-lived one, including being the older one. And they were considered to be among the most outstanding cello virtuosos of their time. And today they're better known as composers of vocal music, as I said, and are among the best representatives of the Galant style. Now, the Galant style came while Bach was alive. The Bononcini brothers were contemporaries of Bach. And in fact, I kind of noticed a Bach similarity in this, which I'll point out when I get to it. The Galant style was kind of like it led into the classical style. Now, the Galant style was mostly surface show. It was pleasant, enjoyable by people. This really arose because suddenly the working man, and I don't mean like the construction working man, I mean the banker, the sort of professional, had more free time and more money, and he wanted to hear some music. And so there were works being composed for them, and they were pretty much gestural. They weren't really philosophically deep. That wouldn't happen until Haydn and then later Mozart, and I guess we can include Wranitzky now, as we talk about him a lot, in the classical style, which kind of developed harmony further into a more narrative style. So this is really just pleasant music. There's not really much depth to it, but it's really enjoyable and really beautiful.
Great tones.
Yeah, and this particular album is pretty great too. So they're the Galant style. Incidentally, of the two brothers, Antonio Maria, the younger one, had the more virtuosic and elaborate style of composition. Okay, so anyway, on this album, Accademia, Ottoboni, there are 5 instruments, but only 4 players. And there's Marco Ceccato. He's the solo cellist throughout, and also the director of the 4-member ensemble, of which he's one of them. Simone Vallarotonda plays the theorbo, which is kind of how would you call it? It's kind of like it's a long-necked guitar type instrument. Anna Fontana on the harpsichord, and Rebecca Ferri on the low cello. So she's playing the basso continuo. Now, there's also an organ on the recording, which it goes uncredited. We don't know who's playing it.
Oh.
Now, when the organ plays, there's no harpsichord, so I'm guessing Anna Fontana is playing the organ, doubling on the organ. But the album doesn't indicate that, so I really don't know. That's just a guess. I have to say, though, I'm glad the organ is on there because it's one of the highlights of this pretty fantastic album, really, or very enjoyable album. So the first piece on this is Sinfonia per Violoncello, that's the cello, the Italian word for cello, in G minor, and that's by Giovanni, the older brother. This starts out, these are all very short movements, by the way. It starts out with an adagio, and I immediately took a liking to the rich, upholstered tone that came out of the speakers. I was like, oh, this feels good. The cello is very up front. There's a rich-sounding organ continuo. The organ really makes, when the organ appears, it's not in every piece, but it really does enrich the whole sound of the ensemble on this album. I really loved hearing it every time it was on. So whoever was playing it had a good sound and a good sense of what to play. Because a lot of these continuos, they're not written out note for note like a modern piano score would be. They give you chords, and you have to sort of shape the chords yourself. Right. And the pluck continuo instruments register through sharply defined cello continuo and organ. I like the way the cello is playing the bass, and then the organ will double it, so you'll kind of sometimes get not in this particular movement, but you'll get like a pizzicato on the bass, and then the organ sound will continue, and it's just really magical. Okay, so we get a brief, slow, mournful first movement. Then we go on to the Allegro movement, which is more lively, with the organ playing in a higher range, making it very discreet here. Along with the soloist, the basso continuo, cello, and theorbo, I hope I'm saying that right. I don't even know how to say that. Theorbo, register more strongly. I like the arrangement and choice of instruments here in this whole piece, really. In the Largo movement, the third movement, track 3, the long-breathed organ, the long-breathed organ, takes the continuo as the solo cello continues in a lovely legato line. Beautiful melody. And the theorbo provides some twinkling harmonic underpinning, or really decoration, I'd say here. A soothing and calming movement. Check that out. The fourth movement is a minuet, and that's kind of an odd way to end a work, because a minuet isn't really so emphatic. It's kind of tends to be very elegant. Here, the organ and cello combine in an interesting way for the basso continuo part, which is the bass line. The cello plays a pizzicato note, and the organ duplicates it. This is what I was talking about at the beginning. In its deep, endless breath, and the cello solo is active. It saws away at the jumpy melody. You can really hear the attack on this particular piece. And that's not a bad thing. This is a pretty good beginning to this work. I really liked that they had the organ in the first work. We move on to a composition by Antonio Maria, the younger brother. This is a sonata a violoncello solo, so it's not only a violoncello, a cello, it's got an ensemble in it, in G major. All right, so a sonata would be a more chamber-like work, I guess, if they call it a sonata. And here the harpsichord comes in. We hear that. It accompanies the solo cello, and there's a theorbo in this too. Mm-hmm. This first movement, the Largo, reminded me of something from Bach. One of the I'm wondering if Bach kind of heard this or had the score and kind of said it in his own way, or vice versa. It's hard to say, really, but it seems to have been these kind of themes tended to be passed around back in the day, in the Baroque era. Second movement, Allegro, has an active cello figuration, less aggressive than in the first work by Antonio. Oh, no, this is Antonio, sorry, by Giovanni, with harpsichord accompaniment, some cello basso continuo as well. Third movement, Adagio. This is another. These are all short movements, by the way. This Adagio is only 54 seconds long. It's like over before you even realize it started. It features another lovely legato theme on the solo cello. It's a duet and features the second cello playing an accompaniment. There's nothing else, which is kind of an interesting change in timbre. Ends on an open cadence, leading to the fourth movement, Saraband, another odd way to end the work. To be honest, though, this is pretty fast for a saraband. They're usually kind of slow, stately dances, but I guess the Italian idea of them was a little different. It's a moderate speed, and it's immediately appealing, melodic material, as we would expect from the galant style, and from an Italian galant style especially. Both Bononcinis were apparently gifted in the area of melody. They wrote a lot of songs after all. And this is a rather cheerful movement, which is a mood not usually associated with the traditional Spanish saraband. But maybe the Italian one kind of, I think there were different types, really, of saraband, but we're used to the Spanish one. Or am I thinking of a pavan? I'm all confused now. Anyway, saraband is usually slow, though.
Yeah, these two have, the second and fourth movement have the real pronounced dance rhythms to them.
Right.
And the strumming is, rather intense, so they're kind of invigorating in contrast to the other movements. So I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah,
and they sound great too. They got that rich sound.
I should say, cello is one of my favorite instruments, and it is my favorite of the string family. So I always really like a great cello tone. And this guy's cello tone is really awesome because it's very warm and rich, but at the same time, it has that little burr of roughness on it.
It's kind of like a matte quality to it.
Yeah.
Sort of. I think it's got strings. He's not using those shiny aluminum or steel strings that they use.
That little kind of rough fuzz on top of that tone that keeps it really interesting. And he's able to bring that out when he wants a little edge in some places. So I found it a real alluring, attractive tone on this cello. It's so rich, but a little rawness left on the leading edge of it. Very attractive and draws you into it.
I remember in the 1980s when recordings on period instruments really became a thing. It was such an exciting sound. There was a lot of battles in music. Oh, we're really going to use these old instruments, but they sounded really unique, and they had that roughness. At the time, I was listening to a lot of rock music. And rock music was kind of raw and had like kind of this rough, kind of quality to it. And the period instruments approximated that sort of thing in an acoustic way.
Right.
There was something kind of, it didn't blend perfectly with the rest of the ensemble, and I found that really exciting, and I still do really today. All right, let's go on to the next piece, which is a sonata in A minor by Giovanni Bononcini. the older brother. Starts with an andante. The Italians like to start slow here. They kind of, cello and harpsichord here, and there's a basso continuo by the second cello. Slow tempo here in this rather earnest-sounding movement. And this is a pretty long movement, actually, 3 minutes and 37 seconds, comparatively, for the rest of the pieces. I mean, it's not like this 30-minute movement or anything like that. The solo cello carries all the melodic interest here, and the theorbo occasionally adds a few comments. Second movement, Allegro, comes across as a high-stepping dance. This is one of your dancey melodies again. Accents are hit pretty hard at the opening, and there's a contrasting quieter section where we can hear the harpsichord clearly with the solo cello. Then the opening heavily accented section returns. Third movement and final movement, minuetto, which kind of goes into a grazioso, or the middle part is a grazioso. This is it's an elegant minuet, which is really unusual way to end a piece, but in the galant style, we didn't have the classical style that Mozart and Haydn perfected yet. They always had a faster and more kind of sort of earthy last movement. This has an appealing lilt to it, especially when the opening three notes dissolve into a brief pause before the rest of the melody is played. Really lovely minuet theme. The grazioso section, starting at around 1 minute and 20 seconds. That's not an exact time, but it's around there. There's not much of a break between sections, and it doesn't contrast much with the opening, and may be hard to pull out for new listeners to this kind of music. The transition is subtle. It features a busier harpsichord line, and the lilt has disappeared, so you can notice it, but it's subtle. But it's as lightly played as the opening. The cello lays off on its attack a bit to make the contrast noticeable, and the opening repeats at about 2 minutes and 52 seconds into the track, and you can tell when that happens. There's a brief pause before it begins. Okay, moving on to the next piece, tracks 12 through 15. Giovanni Bononcini again, the older brother. Sinfonia per violoncello solo in D major. Okay, so this is like a bigger work. The first movement is Largo Allegro Grave, so it's got contrasting moods, and this made me think a little bit of C.P.E. Bach, who came much later than this. I don't think he was. I think he may have been alive at this time, but when the Bononcinis were older. This is a mournful, slow opening, and it kind of clouds up and results at the 1 minute and 10 second mark into an aggressive bowing on the cello, which suddenly stops at 1 minute and 25 seconds. The thing that made me think about C.P.E. Bach was mood is the most important element, or the emotions, and that's what we're getting here. Different contrasting emotions. The opening melody comes back, sounding even more mournful. Second movement, Allegro, is kind of dancey, and the cello is busy with figuration in this movement, accompanied only by the harpsichord. The third movement, Adagio, starts with a breathy sound from the cello, and is accompanied by quite a few actual breaths from the soloist. I think the mic is really close here. No, that's not a bad thing, though. It's really enjoyable. Real. Yeah, it's real. The sound gets fuller as the section goes on, and this is a brief movement at 1 minute and 5 seconds. Harpsichord accompanies. Last movement, again, a minuet. This is a cheerful and surprisingly fast-paced minuet. They're usually around mid-tempo. Still, it has a minuet rhythm, and it's only 57 seconds long, and has only the first minuet section. It doesn't have a contrasting middle section. It's very short. It's a satisfying ending, fast enough. Okay, getting back to the younger brother, Antonio Maria Bononcini. Sonata da Camera in A major, and has a nickname La Comodina. This starts with a cantabile opening movement, track 16. And the entire ensemble is playing at the beginning of this. The second cello playing lightly in the upper register, offering a discrete continuo line. The cello line is a melodic winding melody, and this movement is fairly long at 4 minutes and 27 seconds, so there's a lot going on. There's a really odd-sounding transition at 2 minutes and 10 seconds to a new section with some odd leaps in the melody. Now, I'm not saying odd-sounding in the sense that the ensemble got it wrong. It's just the odd it's just the leaps in the melody are a little, they really catch your ear because it just sounds so against what we've heard so far. It's noticeable because of the mostly conjunct phrasing of the opening section. Conjunct meaning the notes have a curve to them and they sort of climb and fall with neighboring notes as opposed to leaping to a higher register. We swiftly get back to the more comfortable opening section. There's some lovely sounds from the theorbo and harpsichord as the movement winds down. Second movement, Allegro, is another high-stepping rhythm and leaping melodic figure from the solo cello, with accented, meaning staccato in this case, because you can't really accent chords on the harpsichord. You do it by making them short, and they stand out. In the middle section, an aggressively strummed theorbo enters. That was a pretty interesting sound, really. It mainly sticks to its strumming role with the harpsichord playing block chords. The dancing melodic theme continues to the end. Third movement, Affettuoso, is a brief movement to close the piece. It's very affettuoso. It comes across as like a tender, private, affectionate moment with sounds that caress the ear, as one would caress a lover. Tracks 19 to 22, Antonio Maria Bononcini, the younger brother, Sonata 4. These four movements, this work was the highlight of this album for me. It's also, I think, the longest piece on the album, so it's got a lot of activity. And that activity is all interesting. The organ, first of all, is in this, and part of what's interesting about it is the approach of the musicians. They make this ear-catching all the way through. The four of them just throw out all these kind of interesting sounds without getting in the way of the music. And I really appreciate this because an entire album of music like this could easily just get boring if it's just played straight. Mm-hmm. So, but they've obviously taken a lot of time to pull out the instrumentation and arrange it so that it's really interesting, or perform it so it's really interesting. This is a fantastic performance all the way around. So the first Largo movement has the organ with the theorbo. I'm guessing that the harpsichord is playing the organ, as I said. There's a pretty interesting arpeggio figure in the cello, followed by a double-stopped pitch-bending sound that's achieved by moving the fingers slightly up and down the strings. It's really odd. I've never heard anything like that in music of this era. I'm wondering if that's in the score. It must be. It is by the more virtuosic of the brothers, so who knows? It could be. The opening material repeats and tension builds up at the end of the 3-minute and 12-second movement via a repeated stop on a chord of tension. So it keeps hitting this chord without cadencing. So you're building up all this tension, and we get a full cadence at the end. Second movement is Allegro Faster with short phrases followed by the pauses in the solo cello line. Again, this is a surprising and creative movement. It's longish at 2 minutes and 53 seconds, given the average length of tracks on this album. I love the deep bass sound the organ pedal achieves. This is what makes this, it's the performance here that makes this movement great. There's real chest cavity stuff in that. If you have a subwoofer, make sure it's turned on for this. It'll feel good. The bass fills the whole room when the note is sounding, and it made me feel like I was under this. I was in this swimming pool and I was submerged in bass water. It's like you put you get in this pool and all of a sudden your whole body's like, and then you get out and it stops. It was so awesome. I loved it. It's like a pool filled with bass, if you can imagine such a thing. I can. Or I don't have to. I heard it. Okay, nice recording there. The cello has a lot of quick, repeated note figuration, requiring a sharp bowing technique, and the opening material returns at the end. Great recording on that movement. For those wanting to sample that, track 20. Moving on to track 21, movement 3, Adagio. Starts with a ticking rhythm. I always think of those when you have 4/4 and you have a quarter note on each one, it kind of comes across as a ticking rhythm to me. On each beat of that, dun, 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 that kind of thing. It stops when the cello plays recitative-like material that morphs into quickly arpeggiated figuration. Again, very interesting. approach. The ticking rhythm returns at 54 seconds or so. A very pleasing and inventive movement in a pleasing, inventive sonata. The bass notes produced by the organ on the tonic chord of cadences are deeply satisfying. These cadences totally resolve with that bass note. It resonates richly, and you'll notice them. If you don't know what a cadence is, just listen for the bass notes here. You'll hear them. It's when we tonic chords are kind of like the or cadences are sort of like the period at the end of a sentence in writing. So in music, a cadence sounds like the end of a phrase or a section. This is a fairly long movement of 5 minutes and 15 seconds, which is very long for this album. The movement seems to be structured like a set of variations, and you can hear that great bass pedal on the final cadence of the movement again. Fourth movement is Allegro, strongly accented chords in the opening theme, followed by some pretty quick cello figuration and very impressive playing here by the soloist Marco Ceccato. He gets opportunities in this 3 minute and 8 second movement to show off his bowing skills, which is mostly what the virtuosity is on this album. The music goes back and forth between slower melodic material and faster bowed material. I don't think you get really rapid kind of runs on a cello from this era. I think the action was a little slower than the modern cello. Anyway, we have one more work. Again by Antonio Maria Bononcini. This is tracks 23 through 25. Sinfonia per Camera in C minor. Starts with a cantabile movement. It's a slow, rather lamenting theme, dragged out of the solo cello and ensemble. In the second section, the material lightens up a bit in its new key as it heads back to the tonic. There are some nice descending arpeggiated chords in the solo cello to end many phrases, and the harpsichord picks up on a few of them too and echoes them. Second movement, Spiritoso, one of those high-stepping dance rhythms in 6/8 time. Brief at 1:49, 1 minute and 49 seconds. The cello soloist is active in this movement, playing most of the rapid thematic material, mostly bowed rapidly. The harpsichord dances along with him in accompaniment. The 6/8 is very easy to spot in this movement because they outline the triplets very clearly. And the last movement is a minuetto, a very brief minuet, a minute and 15 seconds to end the piece and the album. It doesn't sound very minuet-like at the speed it's played, but it's got all the repeating themes. The cello and harpsichord are fairly busy in this movement. So this album has gorgeous sound, excellent tasteful playing, and really excellent and very tasteful and very intriguing orchestration all around. Now the orchestration, when I say that, it's the way the ensemble organizes and performs the works. This is a really unique and very appealing approach. Albums like this can become tedious because of the sameness of the material, but the ensemble varies its orchestration and interpretive approach enough that the ear is constantly drawn in and pleased. A really enjoyable album, and it went by fast. It's about an hour long. Seemed shorter than that. I actually checked the time at the end. I was like, oh, that seemed really short, and it was an hour. Also, ideal listening for the early morning if you're one of these people like me who likes Baroque music in the morning, because it's usually pretty upbeat and puts you in a good mood for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. As you say, this style, the galant, it's kind of, I don't want to call it superficial, but it's not a very...
Yeah, that's what critics say. That's not what really means.
It's not a very deep, emotional sort of pulling on the listener. But it is very well crafted and interesting, and I found it's played here with a lot of zest and energy, especially in the rhythms. The dance-like inducing strumming of the instruments, the theorbo and the harpsichord, staccato nature, enlivens the rhythmic structure and the way they've got it arranged in the performance style. That's contrasted with that deep organ in spots. And you've got a lot of creative contrast of rhythm in the movements. And it moves along really quickly with these short movements, especially at the beginning. So you're getting a constant change of scenery to keep you entertained throughout. And if it's not, extremely deep music, it is wonderfully tonally rich, and the cello just sounds absolutely great. All the instruments are really clear on the recording. The balance is good, and the detail is maybe even too much. As I said, you can hear some breathing noises or whatever, but it just gives you a lively air, like you're almost sitting next to them as they perform it. And so I found it kind of energizing, like I say, in the morning, anytime really, when you want something that's going to give you some rhythmic energy and just sound gorgeous. It's a good album. And anyone who likes cello, you're going to like this, I think.
Yeah, and if you like the organ too. Well, I don't know about that. I really want a recording of like an organ pedal being pushed down for 1 hour. I just love that sound so much. If I had an organ in my house, I think I would do that every day. I would just go to the organ, turn it on, and just hold that pedal down and be satisfied by the sound it makes.
Gets your chakras aligned from the bass.
I think it clears the chakras. I really think it does something positive to your body. I just feel good when I hear it.
Could very well do so.
Because it certainly shakes up some things in there, that's for sure. All right, on to the next piece. This one is, I put this one second because it kind of starts in the Baroque era and then moves into the classical, like up to the year 1799. It covers 50 years of music. Mandolin on Stage, the greatest mandolin concertos. Well, I don't know about that. They may very well be, but I know that there is one Vivaldi mandolin concerto that isn't on this that I really love, but that's okay. This is played by Raffaele La Ragione, who plays the period mandolins. Like, they're all different. I think he plays like a period mandolin to match the era that the piece was written in. And this is the ensemble is a pretty well-known Baroque ensemble these days, Il Pomo d'Oro. Now, this is a great name, by the way. Pomo means an apple, and d'oro means gold, okay? So it means golden apple. But if you say it fast, pomodoro, as one word, it means tomato. So it's kind of a little pun, their name.
I get it. Yeah.
Hey, it's a pomodoro. You get it? Hey, shut up in your face. Anyway. All right, Il Pomo d'Oro. They have it written as golden apple, Pomo d'Oro. Okay. Conducted by Francesco Corti, harpsichord and conductor, and this is on the Italian Arcana label.
I got to say, if you look at the cover of this and you see these kind of, I guess there's 3 different instruments on this album, but if your image of the mandolin is, the modern mandolin, which I think is actually like a tenor mandolin or something. Yeah. Now, that's hard enough to play. Being a guitarist as well, and having tried to play mandolin a few times, it seems like it's made for someone with tiny, really small fingers. Now, if you look at the cover of this album and look at this tiny little mandolin, I really wonder how you could play this thing. I don't know if that's the smallest one on here.
It doesn't look like it has much range. Look, there are 5 or 6 frets on the entire instrument.
The tone varies a bit, but the smallest one that I hear on here is a very plinky sound. But I could just imagine trying to get your fingertips on that little fretboard there. But, it's interesting.
You can't. If you're born with those sausagey fingers, this is not an instrument for you.
Sausage fingers, yeah.
Yeah. You gotta play something else. Anyway. Yeah, the mandolin doesn't have much sustain at all, so it's really just the attack that you're hearing, and it's like the sound is just instantly gone, which is why this is an instrument that lends itself to really fast virtuosic playing. Although not always. There is one beautiful Vivaldi movement, Largo movement for mandolin that we don't hear on this album. That's really lovely. Anyway, we start out with a work by Antonio Vivaldi himself, Mandolin Concerto in C major. Everybody knows Vivaldi, composer of the Four Seasons. Well, guess what? He wrote mandolin concertos too, and they're really beautiful. And 2 of them are really famous, and this is one of them. The opening Allegro is this is the famous movement in this work. I'm not too I'm wondering about the recording, although my ear adjusted to this pretty readily. The low end comes up well. There's a lot of room reverb. Everything came up clearly, though, so there's no problem with the recording. I think I just would have liked a drier sound.
I noticed
maybe that's just me.
Differences on the... So you've got the ensemble pieces, like the next work.
Right.
I noticed a completely different recording sort of... I don't want to say quality, but sound quality and the resonance, everything is different. So it may be in different rooms, or everything was remiked for certain pieces here.
Right. I guess depending on the solo instrument, they wanted to decide how to pick it up, how to... Anyway, everything comes out clearly, though. You hear all the orchestral detail on this. I like the rather high speed and lyrical playing of the orchestra accompanying this work. The mandolin's part is mostly repeated note figuration. So there's a lot of repeated notes. It's strumming. It's plucking, really. That's the that we're listening to here, his technique. I'm finding a lot of interest in the orchestra in this particular movement. The mandolin part is virtuosic and well played. It seems a consistent ringing tone is not something the mandolin is built for. It sounds muted a lot in this movement due to the narrow spaces between frets. Impressive and enjoyable. And this is actually a really famous movement. If you turn it on, you might recognize it from some TV ad you've seen somewhere, because it's used for those sorts of things quite often.
Yeah, you can't get the royalties anymore.
Yeah, too bad, huh? Somebody's getting away with something there. Okay, second movement, Largo. And I love the whole sound world in this movement. The mandolin playing its repeated note melody, the lower strings in the ensemble plucking a pizzicato chord at each downbeat. Really pretty. There's a guitar accompanying at about 45 seconds. And again, a lovely realization of the entire ensemble on the recording. And sensitive playing by the orchestra themselves, as well as the mandolin soloist.
Yeah, he's got a
nice
real
movement.
Finesse in the way that he plays, even without sustain. It's like, it's an imagined sustain. And the sort of phrasing and flair that he uses on that impressed me a lot. Even if you're really limited with the tone you can produce on that tiny instrument, he plays it like it's a much bigger, instrument that he's throwing out with confidence, these lines. So it's a lot of, fun and impressive kind of, performance style, I thought. Yeah,
I like the way you described it as imagined, kind of resonance or imagined continuation. Yeah, you hear the note, it completely dies, but in your head it's still sounding. It's, right. Our imagination actually has a lot to do with the way we hear music. All right, it's an interesting study in itself. There's a famous bit, by the way, in there was I think it was the last piano sonata by Beethoven, where he has you holding a note in the very high end of the piano for longer than I can possibly sound, because the sustain isn't going to be very long up there. And you're wondering why you're holding this note down. Well, it's the imagined sound, really. Yeah, I mean, it has to do with that. You actually do hear it like that. So you want to do something to make the listener feel like he's hearing it for that long. It's pretty interesting. There's a lot of this in music. Schumann did it a lot too. The third movement, Allegro, has a lovely sound from the mandolin as he plays double-stopped chords. I guess if you can call them double-stopped chords on the mandolin, that's a term usually used for the violin. They're really chords. Like on a guitar, they'd be chords or riffs or something. Double-stop chords at the opening. There's more soloistic material after this, and lovely variation of the textures by the ensemble as the phrases repeat. They keep all the repeats interesting. The ear is always engaged in this fairly brief movement. So like the cello album, this one starts out with a lot of really inventive playing on the repeated material to make it continuously interesting. Okay, the way this album is structured is there will be a mandolin concerto, and then there'll be some orchestral work to kind of separate the mandolin concertos. And the first symphonic work we get here is Baldassare Galuppi, who we did a whole album of last year. Yeah, this is Sinfonia in G major from Il Mondo alla Roversa, ossia Le Donne che comandano, ossia Il Regno delle Donne. So it has 3 different titles. The ossia means like or. All right. I like these. We should name movies like that.
Alternative title.
Yeah, Star Wars, or Luke Skywalker, or Darth Vader's demise, or something. He's telling you the whole story in the title. I don't know.
Couldn't decide.
Anyway, this was kind of the low point of the album for me. And I think it's the ensemble's doing here. In the Allegro section, the mandolin doesn't appear in this piece. It's a brief first movement with a full-sounding ensemble. Not too interesting timbrely here, and to me, I feel like the ensemble could have done more to make this interesting. It sounds like a typical classical ensemble. There's a repeating, swooping string melody in the middle section, then back to the more robust opening, which doesn't really get any kind of nuance to it. I mean, they just kind of repeat it. And that's not the case with any of the other works on this album. They really go out of their way to make all this music interesting. This kind of sounds... let me get through the rest of this particular piece. The second movement, Andante, it's another really brief movement at 1 minute and 29 seconds. The ensemble plays the melodies beautifully, but I feel don't go all the way to make this music interesting. It's not terribly interesting music, but you can draw certain things out of it. The repeats are taken in much the same way as the first time we hear them. And the tempo di minuetto, the third and final movement, is very brief at 1 minute and 5 seconds. Sounds like a hornpipe melody that you hear in like Bach's Brandenburg Concerto or Handel's Water Music. A lively piece. Yeah, it's okay. But I feel like here, the inclusion of this on the album sounds kind of like an afterthought. I really feel like the ensemble could have done more to bring this to life. Although they do play beautifully. I'm kind of putting it down, but they do play beautifully, the melodies beautifully. I just feel like they needed to do more on the repeats. My opinion. Anyway, not to worry, because next we get Giovanni Paisiello, Mandolin Concerto in E-flat major. Okay, this is attributed to Giovanni Paisiello. We actually don't know who wrote it. First movement, Allegro Maestoso. Dotted rhythms in the mandolin's opening theme start us off. So dotted rhythms, dun 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 dun. Okay, it just makes the first note longer, and the second note is very brief. This is more firmly structured than the briefer Vivaldi. We're getting sort of into the classical era here, and all the material. Yeah.
I'm more of a shimmer in the sound of the mandolin here, so I wondered if this is a different instrument than the Vivaldi.
It has to be, yeah. All the material in this piece is interesting too. Now, I was just kind of complaining about the Galuppi, but this is a complete about face. This sounds fantastic. The mandolin chimes out its melodies like bells. I love the way the accompaniment is realized. It's very present, and they have an appealing way of shaping the melodic material. Listen after 1 minute and 30 seconds to the cellos. There's a pause at around 3 minutes and 42 seconds that makes it seem the movement is over, but the mandolin comes in solo with the same energy he's been soloing with, and the orchestra dutifully comes in and lightly accompanies. Nice movement and a nice discovery, this movement and really this piece. I want to mention again, listen after 1 minute and 30 seconds to the cellos for the shaping of the melodic material. It's really nice. Okay, second movement. By the way, that was track 7, in case you want to sample that. Track 8, second movement, Larghetto Grazioso, starts with a string theme. The harpsichord acts as continuo here. And this one broods a bit in its minor key. The mandolin comes in with a theme. There's a lovely turn of phrase by the orchestra. I'm going way too fast here. I'm just too excited. This is so good. To start a new melody in the mandolin just after 1 minute. It's a movement full of lovely turns of phrase, and whoever composed it knew a thing or two about grabbing an audience's attention. Lovely, quietly muted phrase at after around 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Check that out. The mandolin gets a cadenza just after the 4 minutes and 45 second point, and he takes it to sound a bit like a recitative in an opera, which would have been a very common thing to do. Opera was very popular in this era. Though musical turns and repeated notes emerge soon afterwards. The ensemble comes back and brings the movement to a closing cadence. Third movement, Allegro, track 9. This has a broad 3/4 or 6/8 feel to it. It feels like 3/4 to me, but it could very well be a slow 6/8. It sounds like a broad type of dance. The rhythm is lively and high-stepping. The mandolin solos appealingly after the opening material. I enjoyed the impressively virtuosic trills after 1 minute and 45 seconds into this track 9. This seems to be a rondo form. We keep hearing the opening material, and the work comes to a close at the 4 minute and 51 second mark. This is a highly appealing work. Make sure you give it a listen. It's not so famous, although it says it is. I don't know. It was new for me. Track 10, this one actually is by Giovanni Paisiello. Sinfonia, in B-flat major from La Serva Padrona. This was an opera written, well, there may have been different versions of it. There was an opera written by Pergolesi called La Serva Padrona. I think this is a different opera, though. Just the same story with different music, which often happened in the operatic world. Okay, this is another non-mandolin work to cleanse our palate after the last, our ear palate. If your palate, cleanse our ear canal, let's say, after the last the last concerto. This one features a classical sounding ensemble who start with rushing orchestral strings. This work seems to move somewhat like a concerto grosso from the Baroque era as far as its form goes. Different parts of the opening theme come in to separate the material. This is well played. I liked this one. In fact, everything on this album is well played, including the Galuppi, but the Galuppi needed a little more, I felt like. Anyway. Tracks 11 to 13, we get to Francesco Lecce's Mandolin Concerto in G major.
Yeah, I really like this one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It says famous mandolin concertos, and I haven't heard this one either. This was the first time I ever heard this one. Maybe they're famous among mandolin players. Relatively, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, this one has a flowery opening with the mandolin and the orchestra playing together. I like the sound of the mandolin during its first solo. It's provided with a violin bed. The mandolin's sharp attack contrasts well with the disguised, inaudible attack of the strings. So the strings just kind of come in, and then you keep hearing the attack on the mandolin. It's just a great contrast. There's virtuosic speed on the solo. It breathes well, but is fast. And that's a key to keep in mind, how the mandolin soloist, despite the fast speeds he's playing at, always gives his phrases room to breathe, the mark of a great virtuoso. It's very musical playing, and that's what we love about Italian musicians in general. We're going to hear some of that in the jazz section, too. They're very musical.
It's the same thing in jazz, too, where you're improvising on the spot. The mark of a great improviser is he leaves enough space for you to think about what you just heard before launching into the next melodic, development of that. And so I think both in composition and improvisation, those kind of qualities of maturity and refinement of composition, they're kind of a lot of overlap in what is, a really nice style here.
Right.
And I found that a lot in this piece. I thought this was a really nice composition.
Yeah, I thought so too. By the way, speaking of space, there's a TV show in Japan. I don't even know the name of it, but it airs every New Year's Day evening. It's like a once-a-year thing, and it's sort of like a quiz show where these celebrities sort of have to answer these rather culturally high-level questions, which you can never imagine something like this happening in the U.S. But one of the things they have to do is there are two orchestras that play, and they have to guess which one is the professional orchestra and which one is the student orchestra. Now, needless to say, the student orchestra plays exceptionally well, right? But I can always tell the difference between, and the secret to knowing the difference is what you just said. The music breathes more. I mean, the student orchestra plays virtuosely, but they play slightly more mechanically.
Yeah,
there's more like but it's not really that noticeable. But if you've been listening to it a lot, you can spot it right away. The professional orchestra leaves like more it bends the tempo very slightly just to kind of get certain things to register. And
it lives.
My Japanese friends are always really amazed at how I guess this every year.
Well, if they saw your CD collection, that would be,
right.
You would be like the art authenticator who had the museum of artifacts to compare it to. It's all there.
On that same show, the next question they ask is, they show you 2 bonsai trees, and you have to guess which one was made by the great artist and which one's an amateur one. And I have no criteria for this. No. I have no idea what to look for.
We're going to lose on that one. Yeah.
I just have to leave that to my Japanese friends.
Yeah.
All right. I look at them and I'm like, I have no idea. They both, and actually one of them looks like more ornate than the other one always, but you don't know. Mm-hmm. That's not what the quality they're looking for is. I don't know what it is. Okay, the second movement. We're still on the, by the way, the Francesco Lecce Mandolin Concerto in G major. This is the second movement. We're already knocked out by the first movement. So the second movement, Largo, which is track 12, has a lilting, rather haunting melody spelled out by strings with a plucked instrument acting as continuo. I'm guessing it's a theorbo, so we're back to that from the previous album. I like the spare strings that accompany the mandolin's turn at the melody. When the strings take over after about the 2-minute mark, they're accompanied by the deep sound of the thrumming theorbo. It's a new sound on the recording, and the variety just keeps the ear engaged. Something a little more intimate from the mandolin follows after 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Beautiful movement. Check that out. The third movement, track 13, Allegro Balletto. This movement comes across as fairly aggressive in its dance quality. It's very, ballo is a dance in Italian, so balletto would be like a lovely dance, I guess. This sounds aggressive. It's very bold and masculine sounding. There are a lot of brief pauses or retards in between melodic phrases. There's an odd hitting of wood sound that I heard twice in this movement, and I'm wondering if it's part of the score or if it's just someone dropping something on the wooden floor. Did you notice this?
No, I didn't notice that, no.
Okay. I was listening to it through speakers, though, so it could have even been something in my house. I mean, I don't know.
It could be.
But I'm pretty sure it came from the speakers. I should have put the headphones on for this. I guess the latter. I think it was somebody dropping something. Which happens. You hear squeaky chairs and stuff on recordings.
Yeah, it can happen.
Classical recordings sometimes, or things like that. No worries, though. It doesn't distract from the performance, and in fact seems to belong to it. There's a cool final-sounding cadence about a minute from the end, but the music comes back and goes on. The mandolin gets one more chance to show his virtuosic chops before the final cadence material lands, and he does a lovely repeated note fade with his phrase ends on a retard. Really beautiful. Retard is a slowing down in Italian. Nice work. Yeah, give that a listen. All right, we get our final sort of separating piece here. This is by Franz Joseph Haydn, the famous Haydn. Sinfonia in D major, La Pescatrici, which means the fishermen, I guess. I don't know. Pescatore would be a fisherman. It's fish something. I don't know. Pescatrice. Fisher women? I don't know. Anyway.
Fishmongers. I don't know. Whatever.
It could be the fishmongers. That could be right. Okay. Allegro movement. You can hear the cleaner classical lines in this piece. We're really evolving into the classical movement. And the ensemble sounds like they've adapted by including more players. There are hunting horns in this, and there are also pastoral elements like pedal basses. A pedal bass is when the bass imitates the organ bass that I love so much. It just hammers down one note, and there's a lot of other material on top of that. The melodic material is all appealing, as we'd expect from Haydn, a nicely paced performance of great musicality. And the final work on this album, tracks 15 to 17, is by Johann Nepomuk Hummel, Mandolin Concerto in G major. Hummel was a contemporary of Beethoven. In fact, I think he was one of Beethoven's students. And he was expected by, I think he even knew Mozart too. but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, he was expected to be the next great Beethoven, but I guess that didn't happen. He did write a lot of highly appealing music, though, because he was considered one of the great musicians of his day, certainly, and he showed a lot of promise as a composer, too.
The few trumpet concertos that is in the repertoire, there's not a lot of trumpet works, it's, but his is one of the ones that's every trumpet player learns to play.
Right, there's a great album of some of his piano works by Stephen Huff that came out like 20 years ago. It's really, really worth looking for. You're not going to find it. It's on Hyperion Records, of course, so you're not going to find it on your streaming services. But if you can get a hold of it, that's well worth hearing. All right, so his Mandolin Concerto in G major. Indeed, a composer known for his trumpet concerti. First movement, Allegro Moderato e Grazioso. Highly appealing thematic material here, and fairly involved, too. This is the most sophisticated and complexly organized piece on this album. Yeah. And that's not to say it's hard to follow. Don't let that keep you away from it. It's actually a good massage for your brain. Some part of your brain will understand what's going on. It's very appealing. Hummel keeps the mandolin out of the piece until it finally enters with the thematic material at 1 minute and 30 seconds. So this is a real classical work. He really gives it a dramatic opening. La Ragione, the mandolin soloist, really takes his time to make the melody breathe. He's a great player.
What he does on this in the phrasing is great because he, and it's a lot of like scalar lines in this going up and down, but his phrasing is not mechanical at all. It's really flowing accents and just slight hesitations. I mean, they're ever so slight to give that natural sort of stretching of the time or speeding up without deviating from the tempo, so that it actually feels like it's breathing and alive as the musical lines come through. It's a really high level of musicianship to play with this kind of nuance. I enjoyed that a lot.
Right. There's a lot of space around every note. This is deeply satisfying to hear. If you're a music student, you might want to give this album a listen, because this is what a great soloist does, basically. Or a very musical player does. It's a longish sonata form movement, almost 8 minutes, but the material is satisfying and appealing, and the soloist does a lot to draw that appeal out. Excellent pacing by the ensemble as well. Il Pomodoro are very well known at this point, so they've played a lot of this music. Second movement, Andante con variazioni, the theme, so we're going to have variations here. The theme is a charming melody with a mechanical type of ticking rhythm, the sort of cute theme often used in variation movements. The first variation is more flowing. The second features quick dotted rhythms. There's a variation that features only an ensemble without the mandolin, surprisingly. And afterwards, the mandolin plays a constant figuration in which he pulls the melodic notes out of the texture. Very nice. Ends on a nice upward figure. And the third movement, Rondo, very popular form from the day, has a pretty flowery theme with a broad 3/4 rhythm and horns involved in the cadence that ends it. Again, this might be a 6/8 theme. When there are horns, it's usually a hunting theme in this era. The first departure features brief phrases, then elaborated on. The rondo theme is played on the mandolin more gently than in the opening when it returns. This is what I wanted to hear in the Galuppi, something like this, where he takes the repeating theme in a different way than he played it the first time. Then the whole orchestra joins to restate it. We go to a departure in the minor key, then come back to the sunny major rondo theme for the ending. How great was all of this? I enjoyed this immensely, too. This is a good week for me, really, as far as music goes. It wasn't a good week in any other way.
This was a nice one to finish on because it sort of hints at the future. This is more like a real classical concerto with the differentiation between the ensemble and the soloist, like we're used to hearing in other works. So it's sort of the culmination of this little kind of historical journey too. It's all really good.
It's really a 50-year journey. 1750 around Vivaldi too. Yeah.
You can see the evolution of the compositional style. Also the different, it's subtle, but if you listen really carefully, you'll hear the differences in the mandolins that he uses, and the tonal quality is different. Hence, his approach and what he, the way he phrases things is different on the different instruments. I thought it's quite impressive, the musicality he gets out of this instrument with no sustain.
Right.
Really, he can do a lot with it, and the mandolin-centered pieces, the recording quality is excellent. There's a little variation in the ensemble interludes. It's not overwhelming or anything. Everything is well played, but outstanding musicianship and stylizations of these mandolin playing things. Really added another kind of dimension in my mind to the musicality of the mandolin.
Right. For me personally, so many of the elements I love most about Italian music from this era appear on this recording. The entire album's appealing. It's played and programmed with enough variety so it's highly enjoyable to listen to straight through. Highly, highly recommended, everybody. Give that a listen.
Yeah, another good one to charge up your morning. Get that caffeine, get your espresso, and, those eyes opened up with all the rhythms and really sharp attacks on this album will get you ready for your work day. So
yeah, that is my recommendation. I've been doing this for years now, just starting the day with Baroque music. I recommend, listener, that you do the same. All right, our last classical album is a 20th century composer, Sandro Fuga, who I didn't know much about. I had actually heard a cello sonata by him that was on a Naxos recording with two other composers. And I don't want to say who they are because I might get one of them wrong. But so I knew that piece, and it was really appealing. It was very melodic, well put together. And so I was curious to hear this. Piano Sonatas 1 through 3 by Sandro Fuga. And these works are played by two of his children, Giacomo Fuga and his sister Carlotta Fuga. That's Giacomo's sister, Sandro's daughter. And a third pianist, Claudio Voghera. Each of them plays one of the sonatas. Okay, so a little bit about Sandro Fuga. Who was he? His mother was a member of the Nono family, who the great composer Luigi Nono came from that family, great 20th century Italian composer. So there's a connection there. And the Nono family were pretty artistic. Luigi Nono's uncle Urbano was a sculptor, and his grandfather Luigi was an artist. So a family I would have liked to have been born into, let's just say. Yeah. Sandro Fuga was born in the Veneto, which is where Venice and Verona are. A lot of V's there. They like that letter, I guess. I don't know. But Fuga, he became associated with the city of Turin, which is in the Piedmont region, where he became a professor of piano and later of composition at what would become the Turin Conservatory. And he later became director of the conservatory, so he's like a major player in that city especially, and really in Italian music in the 20th century. Fuga, his music really didn't get out of Italy until now we're getting these recordings and starting to hear them. Fuga wrote a lot of piano music, but the booklet notes for the CD claim that these three sonatas represent the summit of that music. Fuga was critical of the avant-garde in vogue in Italy while he was alive, but he wasn't really a conservative. He was a very modern composer, but he was more like, he was looking towards other music that had come from the immediate past, let's say.
My impression is that, he doesn't, use any of these, things that were going on at the time when he was composing that you hear in other works, but he freely draws from all things that had come before. And that's kind of interesting. It makes his music kind of unpredictable, particularly in some of it. The harmonic movements are interesting and lots of unexpected things. But he uses a lot of rhythmic elements that make the listener comfortable. So you'll be able to follow, the sort of cadence of the music. Right. And he'll make it sufficiently rhythmic so that you can see the structure. And the structure and the development is not unstandard at all. And so I noticed that. And when you say the music that had immediately come before, I noticed like in this first piece, it draws on some impressionistic kind of French qualities in it. And what he also does nicely is he alternates in the movements sort of what he's going at. So in this first piece, I found the first and third movements are more of sort of angstful or rather unsettling type of searching movements, and they're alternated with more placid sort of almost pretty. His music can be very pretty at times, I found. Yeah. And so he gives a nice balance of that tension and release in the structure of his music too. So I found it very relatable for 20th century music in many ways.
This was well, first of all, let me just mention this was on the Naxos label. So give them a shout out,
because it was my first listening to him. So
yeah. I had only heard one piece by him before, and I was suitably impressed by it. I mean, I thought it was really appealing. These two, but I think these took a little more work than that cello sonata did. You should hear the cello sonata. I mean, you like the cello so much.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be a work.
I'm interested to check it out.
You'll have to hear. Just type it in on Naxos. It'll come up, I'm sure, on Deezer. So the first work is Piano Sonata Number 1, composed in 1957, and this is played by Giacomo Fuga, his older son, the older of the two piano playing. I think he had more than 2 children, but I'm not sure. Anyway, this is in 4 movements, and the first movement is Moderato and goes to Tormentoso. Whenever I see that marking, I'm like, oh man, here we go. But actually, it's not so unappealing, let's say. Okay, now Fuga, by the way, I've heard his playing before because he played the piano on the cello sonata that I heard from around 2014 that came out. The recording came out. This starts as a tormented whirlpool of notes in the lower end of the piano. It's tonal, but it's a rather disturbed tonal.
It moves around a lot.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Charybdis, the whirlpool in the Odyssey. This whirlpool of notes reaches a crescendo in ringing repeated notes in the higher register, then quickly descends back to the low register and goes beyond that to some very low bass notes. One thing I notice about this composer, and this is going to be true of all 3 works, is that he really does like to climb towards like a higher register as though there's a big effort being made, and then just fall back into the lower register. And he spends a lot of time in the lower register of the piano in all of these works, really. After that happens, by the way, the low bass notes, the material becomes a bit more ruminative, with quick short figures followed by a pedal bass note. These figures become more ornate gradually, like they're kind of growing leaves or something. And so there's an organic quality to it. But they maintain their quickness and shortness throughout the section. The section dissipates, and that's actually a word I want to use a lot for Fuga's music too. Sections, they don't end. They just sort of dissipate. They just sort of fade away, and then a new idea will start. So that's part of his style. And there's an upward staccato theme emerges from that. It gets passed around to different registers and winds up in the bass as the right hand plays repeating notes in the rhythm. And we're about 5 minutes and 30 seconds into the movement at this point. The bass suddenly erupts forte at 5 minutes and 50 seconds or so, and we get some louder, agitated music. This reaches a climax with ringing repeated high notes at the 7-minute mark. And repeated notes is certainly a key thematic element of this movement. We hear them a lot in the 7th and 8th minutes of the movement. They're emphatically played here in the 7th minute. They suddenly quiet down at the 8 minutes and 30-second mark, and a short figure has sprouted from the repeated notes in the right hand. That organic quality, again, of something growing. While the bass keeps hammering on a pedal point note, the music heads towards a final climax in the 9th minute and reaches a deep zither-like strum at the end. That's done on the key with the keys, by the way. The whole movement is abstract but clearly agitated and or disturbed. Second movement, Andante, has a slower and more pleasant melody, but it's more rocky than curvaceous in profile. The opening winds down to something new at about 1 minute and 35 seconds or so, and the last curving resolve repeats as part of the material for a new theme. It's a bit lighter in texture and quieter and more ethereal in tone than the opening. There's some pretty ornamentation in the melody. The first time I've been able to say that in this piece. Okay.
Yeah.
This section, it's a bit intellectual at the beginning. This section goes directly into closing material, starting just before the 4th minute and leading to a resolve at the end. The third movement, Allegro Moderato, has a buildup of tension, with half phrases left hanging at the end, only to repeat and try to go farther. It's like there's a trying to start a motor on a motorboat quality to the opening rhythm, like and it won't start. It just kind of tries, and then finally it takes. It builds to something more complete finally, then falls back to its original sort of opening profile. At 1 minute and 30 seconds, an insistent ostinato bass starts, so this would be where the motorboat really catches and starts moving. And the upper hand plays rapid scale figures. The music gets more agitated as it heads upward in range, and the ending has some rocking bell-like tones, like rocking back and forth, which then descends down the keyboard to the bass range. There's a quick rush up the keyboard and then quickly down again to end the movement. Fourth movement is Moderato e calmo, and then ends molto agitato, agitated. We know it's coming. Well, not really, but I mean, we know what mood's coming. This is a questioning, quietly earnest melody starting the piece. Sandro Fuga doesn't seem to have been a humorous guy. This is all pretty serious music, actually. It's got pretty harmony though. He's got good taste, let's say. This bit is touching. It's very different in profile to what we've heard in the last 3 movements, and this has a gentle quality to it. But it must have been a lovely memory, because the more agitated trembling in the bass end of the piano reemerges to connect this movement to the first movement's darkness. A chordal section comes after this, with the chords gently played. After that, the agitated music reemerges. It gains some melodic momentum, then quietens down in its bass range. There's some silence, and then sets of high bell-like chords quietly ring out at around 6 minutes and 45 seconds and after. This suddenly ends, and at 7 minutes and 45 seconds, the agitated material returns, but never regains momentum. It quickly quietens down into resolving patterns and reaches a satisfying, quiet conclusion. This is a pretty interesting and intellectually satisfying piece, too, and it achieves a nice balance by the end.
I think this is my favorite one of the 3, actually.
I think it might be the best played, too, although they're all well played. I can't really say. Maybe it's the piece. Maybe he just kind of got the...
I guess I liked here... This is where I mentioned I felt the second and at least part of the beginning of the 4th movement have that impressionistic quality to them, where he focuses a lot on rhythm and these, like you said, the heavy bass lines and these sort of working phrases that work up but then hang off. And I felt that he shifts his emphasis to focusing on the sort of tonal qualities, leaving a lot more space in the second movement and in the beginning of the 4th. And I thought that gave Sonata number 1 more kind of contrasting qualities and some actual beauty in the pieces compared to the other 2.
Yeah. Let's move on to the second one. This is Piano Sonata number 2. These aren't giving keys, by the way. They're just called Piano Sonata number 2.
It keeps changing all the time. So.
Yeah, so there's no real, key that can be said to be in. This one was composed in 1976, and the soloist here is Carlotta Fuga, his daughter, younger than Giovanni, who played the first piece. It starts moderato and starts with chiming chords, appealing, but with a bit of darkness in them that becomes more ominous as the theme goes on. Yeah. There's a lot of darkness in this guy's piano music. I didn't hear so much of it in the cello sonata, though.
But in this one, it's interesting. In the end of this movement, it almost gets like a pop quality to it. I thought it was an interesting transformation.
I called that sunnier. Yeah, it gets sunny all of a sudden. Yeah, this dark quality creeps into the bass. After the chords, there seems to be a variation on the thematic material, this time with broken up chord patterns from which a melodic figuration develops. The figuration speeds up in the next variation, introduced by a descending scale in triplets. The triplet figuration then takes over the thematic material. I do like the organicness of this music. Like once you hear that triplet scale, the triplets become the rhythm, and he'll like generate new things out of these out of this material that he's introduced earlier. And it's really nice. Broken chords and eighth notes follow, then a rather stormy, less harmonically defined section after 3 minutes. This ends up by pounding on a single chord after the 3 minute and 45 second mark without any kind of resolve. The music descends to the lower register. He spends a lot of time there, as I said. And a rather aggressive, pouty march theme is heard at about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The march dissipates. There's that again. It just kind of breaks up and fades away like a fog that suddenly it stops into something thinner. And then there are descending chords over an ostinato bass at around 5 minutes and 30 seconds to 6 minutes and 10 seconds. A new approach starts after a brief pause. It's in the piano's mid-range and sounds a bit sunnier. This is the pop music part that you talked about. Like the beginning of a new day after a rough night. I kind of got that feeling from it. It eventually ends calmly on a full cadence. The second movement in this three-movement work is grave, so this is the middle movement. Starts with a downward ostinato bass and a few dissonant harmonies in the right-hand chords. The bass has a ticking rhythm. Again, it's marking time as it descends and repeats. A crescendo starts and reaches its peak with some emphatic chords, then gives up its trajectory and sinks down again. The ostinato rhythm never stops. Another crescendo begins, ending with more emphatic chords that don't resolve harmonic tension. The music suddenly gets quiet again, pauses for a moment, resumes around 2 minutes and 45 seconds. There's suddenly some brightness at around the 3 minute and 10 second mark when the harmonic profile of the piece suddenly changes. It stays here for a while, but in a brief crescendo manages to find darkness again and just can't get free of that. The ostinato bass line returns at around 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and we're back to the dark feeling of the opening. There's a brief return to the bright material at 5 minutes and 15 seconds, but the music sinks down into funereal, tolling bass notes. Third movement, Allegro vivo e preciso. Allegro vivo is always a nice thing to see. This has an excitable bass line to open the piece. It sounds like an engine revving up for a perpetuum mobile movement, but we don't get that. We just get something busy in the bass with clear thematic material over it. The music gains an excitement in the first movement, the first section, I should say, as it briefly crescendos to its high end. Carlotta Fuga, the soloist, does a lot to keep the voices clear, but I thought the performance in this movement could have used a bit less caution. It comes across well, though. I can't say anything negative about the playing. I just felt like there was kind of like an excitement built into the score that wasn't completely released. There's a climb to the high end of the keyboard after 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and a bit of a climax there as we land on some appealing figuration in the upper range. After this, the music seems to brighten in spite of the occasional crashing bass, but there is something rather aggressive that returns towards the end. The music quietens at the end and climbs again from bass to upper range, then descends rapidly and ends quietly on a repeated bass note. I was really impressed by how Carlotta Fuga kept all the voices clear throughout the work, particularly in the low end where all the different voices remained well defined. A very difficult thing to do in the bass end of the piano. These notes can all just blend together into some mess of sound, but she does very well to keep all those voices clear. Very impressive playing. Okay, the last sonata, Piano Sonata number 3, written in 1980. So there I was in high school, and Sandro Fuga was writing his last piano sonata. I think this was the last one. I don't know. This one's played by Claudio Voghera, the only pianist who's not a member of the family. This one starts moderatamente lento to molto allegro. This starts with a series of short phrases with a syncopated middle chord. It's a 3-note phrase, but the middle chord, 3 chords, and then the middle chord comes on like a syncopated beat. There's a bit of aggression and darkness in the theme. No surprise there. Which I'm coming to believe is characteristic of Sandro Fuga's work, or at least his piano writing. He builds a larger theme on this rhythm and chord pattern. There are lots of sequencing of the chords, and then new ideas growing out of that. We're still more or less in the thematic profile at the 2-minute mark, when there's suddenly a false cadence that leads the thematic material in a more ethereal direction toward the high end of the keyboard. Nice moment here. Just after 2 minutes and 50 seconds, the first theme returns with a rolling bass accompaniment and builds into something rather turbulent at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which dissipates again. Okay, so this happens a lot in this movement, and it kind of feels like the composer had a new idea and wants to kind of get rid of the old one. But it's part of his structural plan. But I like this kind of idea of his, of how the music just kind of breaks up like that and goes into something new. The new material starts up is familiar, and we get an interrupted line, some sinister bass rumblings, another dissipation of the theme, then a rhythmic theme starts and dissipates, and at around 4 minutes and 50 seconds we're heading toward the high end again, trying to break through to some new key or tonal area. It never quite gets there, and we're relatively in the same space tonally and thematically at the 6-minute mark. There's quite a bit of aggression in the bass. There are ominous chords in the bass at 7 minutes and 30 seconds, with a rhythm marking time and the right hand accompanying. By 8 minutes, the material arrives at the high end of the piano, with some ethereal chords repeating. This also suddenly stops, and we get the movement ending material. It's a build-up to a final statement that winds all the way down in a bass note that repeats 3 times. I'm wondering if there's more tension here than the otherwise excellent pianist builds up. Otherwise, he's excellent. He's really good. But I'm kind of wondering if there's like more excitement that's not being released by the playing. Okay. Oh, again, clarity in voices, and that's true in all 3 pianists. It's pretty amazing, and all 3 of them seem to take a similar approach to this music. It's kind of interesting. It kind of sounds sort of like they're all the same pianist in a way. All right, the second movement has Alento Piacere and then goes to Allegro Spiritoso. This starts with a tentative-sounding bass melody, opening this short movement. It's 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Then an active staccato fugue starts, which is maintained for a while. After 2 minutes, the music becomes homophonic, which means that there's a main melody and an accompanying bass line. So there's one melody that stands out from all the others, and remains that way till the end. A run to a lightly taken high note pinned down by a lower chord. Third movement is lento con raccoglimento. Slow melody with chords opens this. It's a very heartfelt theme. By the 2-minute mark, this has made its way to the high end of the piano, where it's lightly played and is floating free with no bass underpinning it. It's a nice effect there, like it's broken free. By 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the music settles into the middle of the piano's range, with one theme going deep into the bass. By 4 minutes and 30 seconds, a rhythm marking time has emerged in the high end of the piano as the thematic chord and melodic material is played in the mid-range with bass notes accompanying. The entire rhythm becomes the ticking motion at around 5 minutes and 20 seconds, the marking time. The music quietens and the movement ends with a lightly taking chords in the high end, accompanied by an ostinato pattern in the mid-range. This is a pretty mysterious sounding movement. And the final molto allegro movement is an active bass accompanying a quick-moving set of chords as the theme. The material morphs rather than develops, and we hear certain themes reappear in different keys or areas of the keyboard. When Fuga changes themes, he suddenly allows the old theme to dissipate, then starts up the new one. as though it's kind of run out of energy, sort of like a battery that died, and then he has to put like a new battery in that does something else. The constant movement happening is pretty interesting. Themes are heard in different sections of the piano, and we get a lot of interesting piano timbres as the music moves suddenly between registers, sometimes with thickly laden harmony, sometimes with very little harmony accompanying themes. And I want to say, because of that thickly laden harmony, this takes like a pianist who can really differentiate between the different lines, and again, Voghera is excellent at this. This seems to be a quality necessary in order to put Fuga's music across well. The movement ends with a pause, followed by a quickly and quietly played downward scale, landing on a bass note. So all three of these performances are good. This sounds like a recording I'd need to get more familiar with, really. There's a lot more to it than I thought there would be, and a first and second listening isn't going to be enough to pick up all that's happening here. There's definitely a lot of content in this music. I certainly wasn't bored. It's not light, but it's not unappealing by any means either. This is a composer I'd like to hear more of and get to know more about. I'd like to hear this recording a few more times without the computer in front of me, where I'm kind of listening and typing what I hear. I'd like to just kind of hear it casually. I'd also love to hear someone else play Sandro Fuga's music, like a familiar pianist whose style I have some familiarity with, because when you hear these are probably the best pianists for a first performance of these works, as they knew the composer themselves. But say a famous pianist that's played a lot of music that's been recorded will have a style, and I'd kind of know more about what his approach to the music would be like, and that would draw something different out for me. Not saying that it would be better, but it would just give me a different angle to think about the music with. But this is a pretty interesting album, and it's a bit of a discovery. I was very interested in it, to say the least.
Yeah, my first contact with this composer, just to reiterate what I mentioned before, as a 20th century composer compared to lots of the other composers at the time, he wasn't really striving to have new compositional kind of techniques, it seems. He's very much using the standard developments and ideas that had come before, but in his own unique ways.
He has a few approaches that are a little different than what we've heard before.
But the elements, his toolbox is what had come before him, and his technique is just different. And in that sense, it makes it very easy to come to this music with established ideas of compositions and things, and then find it pretty comprehensible the first time you listen to it. So I liked that part about it. It wasn't too out there. He does have a, sort of... It is tonal, although it doesn't have necessarily a tone center all the time. It's moving around harmonically, but he's giving you cues with the harmony, which is nice. And I like that he also does appreciate, some sort of melodic development and incorporating, some kind of pretty phrases in there. As far as his style goes, it seems that this agitation is part of his development for most of the pieces, finding something like an irritation that has to be dug out of the music, and that usually starts like down and ends down low on the keyboard. Right. So it's sort of this kind of murky kind of thing, and it'll often have these things cycling and building up out of the bass, almost like ramping up and trying to escape something. Well, it was kind of interesting that we could get a sense of his style just from these pieces.
I know, right?
Yeah, and I found it really interesting, and I found enough that I could hold on to just listen. I only listened to this one once, but it was attractive enough that I'd like to explore it more and hear something else that he's done as well. He's very good at building up tension, especially in I guess it maybe in the performer's interpretation in the Sonata 3 and the third movement. I really liked the phrasing. It's almost this kind of weighted hesitation, whereas the keys become almost stuck or unwilling to respond in the phrasing. And I like that extra heaviness in that. I don't know if it's in the score or he just interpreted it that way, but I liked all the tension points that were built into the music. I found it interesting. So, yeah, If you haven't checked out this composer, you might find it interesting.
He's a composer that should be better known, I think, given these 3 works. And I think these works will repay repeated listenings. There seems to be a lot more in them than... I mean, they're easy to grasp the first time you hear them, but I just felt like there's a lot I was missing that I kind of needed to hear it again and again. So we'll see where that goes. And now we're going to go into Italian jazz, which is a really happening thing.
That's right. We've done a lot of Italian jazz on the program so far. And, hence the title when we put it up there. But piano Paisans. And from here on out, it's all piano. We had the last classical piano one. And we've done a lot of Italian pianists and Italian musicians because there's so much happening when I go through the new releases. Too much is from Europe. I mean, jazz is American music, but the Europeans are really cranking out all these recordings, and a lot of great stuff is coming out of Italy all the time. And last year we had some nice discoveries. Our friend Bruno D'Ambra, his good recording last year that we featured.
Looking forward to a new one by him.
Come on, Bruno. Are you listening? Get something new going. We're going to talk about it right away as soon as it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a friend of the podcast.
Anyway, I've always got a lot of Italian stuff on my list, but I wanted to just do piano stuff this time. So I've got one that goes back a couple months, and then I've got 2 brandy new releases. So we'll go back, start out with this one that goes back to the end of March. This is Italian piano trio, Ipocontrio. And they're on the, I'm not sure how you're supposed to say this label. It's written as capital A period M-A. I don't know if they read it A.MA or A.MA. A.MA Edizioni, which is Italian jazz label, with the Ipocontrio's latest release called Children's Soul. And this features the great Canadian tenor sax player, Seamus Blake, who's made a name for himself because he's a really great player, wonderful tone, and exciting soloist. Anyway, Ipocontrio, this group itself is from Salerno. They've been on this record label since 2016 when they released Continuum, their first recording there. But they're back again for this latest release, Children's Soul. And we've got in this trio on the bass, Francesco Corti. On drums, Armando Luongo. On piano, Bruno Saracone.
You got to do your Italian accent there. Francesco Galatro.
That's more than an accent. That's a performance.
That's how we were talking at the beginning.
Yeah.
Bruno Salicone and Armando Luongo. I should have done the Fuga like that.
Yeah. And we've got, let's see, the sound engineer, Tullio Siriello. And
I don't have his name here.
The producer, Antonio Martino. And this is all original music. And I should mention, Seamus Blake is on 4 of the tracks, 2, 4, 5, and 7 here. We've got a variety of composers among the group, and I'll mention them as we go along. So we start out with the title track, Children's Soul. This is a Saracone original. Starts out really nice with a rubato piano intro. You think it's going to be a ballad, but then suddenly a really unique beat begins with this kind of pulsing 3-note bass figures and really tasty snare kind of digging work from Luongo. It's a unique rhythm. Saracone then gets to the melody. It's nicely spaced out phrases, leaving that space we talked about before. There's some syncopated and accented chords that lead to a pause and then a reset where Saracone gets to do some soloing. Galatro and Luongo mix up the rhythmic feel, so Saracone can really stretch out on a mixture of nice runs and then more rhythmic playing. And if you listen, the interplay in the trio is really good. They adjust to his ideas, his changing rhythms. The accents are there. And so this ensemble really breathes. They're not stuck into a metronomic kind of tempo. The time stretches and matches what they're doing. It reaches a nice climax of chords, and then the original unique pulse of a rhythm returns for another run through the melody to a nice finish. Nice opening track. I really like the rhythmic variety on this recording. I think that's a strength of this trio.
Yes, the album as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah, every tune has its own unique feel to it, which it's not just swing or straight Latin beat or something like that. Every tune's got this interesting rhythmic concept. As does the next one, track 2, Daydreamer. This is original by Longo. Seamus Blake comes in here and he starts it out a rubato intro over the trio's fills. He's got this huge, big tenor tone, but it's got a silky quality too. It's a really intriguing saxophone sound. It's a yearning melody, and then the rubato kind of forms into a 6/8 feel for this piece. Salicone is up first for a solo. He focuses on single clear note lines with a light chord accompaniment by his left hand. He's got a nice touch. He weaves melodic lines that the solo works through and ends up on a series of chords. Then Blake is up for a solo. He's bluesy and breathy while still keeping a big sound on faster lines. Underneath all of this, you'll hear the bass. I really like the string and woody slaps of Galatro's bass. It's got that real percussive quality to it. Sounds organic and real, keeping the rhythm flowing. Blake plays on and on with fresh ideas in his solo, and then he ties it back to the melody, and they bring down the intensity a bit. It does build back up with some drum beats, heavier hitting from Luongo under chord vamping that gives Blake a chance to stretch out a little bit more at the end. Great range of tones that Blake can produce from his sax that you hear at the end. He goes from a fiery, intense, his incendiary burning of notes down to like these smoky embers. It's sort of like when you cut the air intake on the barbecue and just watch the coals kind of go out.
We have a lot of good metaphors today.
He's a great player, turns emotion and sound on a dime to match what's going on there. So really nice piece.
I think we should mention also the piano solo in this. I thought it was pretty inventive. There were a lot of good ideas in it. It was very long. He took a pretty long solo in this, and it never really got uninteresting.
These weaving melodic lines,
right,
just go on and on. Really nice.
I rather enjoyed the there were some shouts of encouragement happening in the background.
I think I mentioned that
in this one
too.
Which up,
but you'll hear some
too.
A la Keith Jarrett grunting and vocalizations along the way playing, which always shows enthusiasm. Right. Track 3, the first Galatro original called Spaceless Odyssey. This one starts with some round woody bass figures and soft repeated notes with kind of piano sprinkles.
I use that word too, sprinkles.
It makes like a wistful intro. There's a big slide down on the bass that comes in and brings the melody in on the piano. It's off to a slow loping swing. And now, despite the title of Spaceless for the Odyssey, there's actually a lot of space in the playing here, which is nice. Luongo is a tasty drummer, adding textures in the gaps of the phrases of the melody. And as I said, Salicone is a bit of a mumbler as he plays, so you'll hear his vocalizations.
Cool,
singing along with his ideas while he plays. In his solo, he hits on some really interesting staccato repeated note ideas, shows a lot of variety and dynamics among his lines and the chord hits. Galatro gets a solo next. It's very laid back, and then Salicone comes back in with some more intensity for the melody, and Luongo mixes things up underneath on the drum kit. So they take it out with some repeated piano figures, which soften as the bass joins in unison. Very nice. Track 4, a Salicone original, Spirit. This one has some interesting harmony changes in a bass intro that brings back Blake on sax for this cool kind of modally moving tune. Has an interesting final section of the melody that contrasts because it has a lifting melody that sort of cycles up. I like how all the tunes have these very different rhythmic feels. This one has cool subdivisions of the beat that are, you can hear really clearly. Salicone's solo here, spacious again, modal ideas and big open chords going through. And when Blake comes in on his solo, he really weaves through these modal changes with interesting lines. He hits some intense high register bluesy ideas, and the beat is really chugging under his solo, so the rhythm section's really driving him on. He brings it down a bit on the contrasting section and then ties it into a final melodic ending. So interesting and fun piece again. Another Saraconi original, track 5, Orione. Drum intro here is starting us out for a fast kind of post-bop style tune. Blake spaces the melody out nicely over the fast beat underneath. So there's a real contrast in the melody line and then the kind of churning rhythm section underneath this one. And Galatro gets some cool ostinato bass figures going under there. Blake comes out furiously from the solo break with some real fiery phrases. Longo gets a drum solo broken up with a piano and bass line in the middle there. And then Blake is back for another run through the melody, and they play it out over quiet vamping and bass figures with some soft sax noodling. It's a really intense tune rhythmically. A lot of fun on this one. Track 6, Galatro original, When She's Not Here. So this has got a longing melody ballad played by Salicone, but drums and bass have some contrasting intense business underneath that pushes it along. So there's a different kind of intensity in the bass and drums compared to the piano. Salicone rings out the notes, getting a nice feeling out of the minor mode that's going on there. The interplay with Galatro's bass lines is like a dance together between the piano and the bass. I feel they're really locked in and like moving step by step together. Galatro gets a solo of his own. Fast running lines on the big bass sound he gets, and then Salicone takes the melody out. All the while, Longo has been trying to drum it into something even more intense, but he finishes with Salicone on soft cymbals. I feel like the way it's contrasted, the drums seem like they want to beat this tune into something, bigger. So you always feel like it's going to burst out into something, but it doesn't quite do that. So it keeps this kind of tension in the rhythm underneath wraps for the whole song. It's kind of an interesting effect. Track 7, Light Mood. This is a Salicone original. And Blake is back again on this one. Again, another new interesting rhythmic feel, shifting syncopated bass patterns under the wispy sax line. It builds into an intense climax of the melody line before coming down to that maybe title referred to light mood, with Salicone playing a soft interlude before Blake's solo. Longo has a nice groove going for Blake to stick his lines to. And he blows another really burning sax solo here. It's a nice climax for the soloing on the album. Piano and bass then vamp around for a pattern for Longo to play a bit, and then Blake joins back in for the final phrase to end it. And
nice
it's kind
title there too.
Yeah,
the late mood is kind of appropriate.
Yeah. And that's all you get here. There's actually another track, the Clifford Brown original, Da Hode, but it's not available on streaming. So if you want to hear that one, you're going to have to buy the CD.
No.
At least it's
that's the way it should be.
It kind of
really.
should be. Yeah. But I checked; it's not on Deezer, it's not on Spotify or Apple. So it seems like it's not released there. All right, yeah. So that's a really good release here. This is a great trio, especially rhythmically and in intensity. They've got a lot of every tune has a different feel. All original compositions, good stuff. And Blake's tenor just, adds another fiery kind of component to it. So I can really recommend this. It's an exciting recording of music. Children's
Yeah, me
solo.
too. I found the playing to be extremely tasteful, and I always like that.
Yeah.
It's very, it's got a lot of decorum to it, and it made me feel just happy and comfortable. Okay,
Yeah.
it was just a good listen, really enjoyable. You get that Italian sense of melody, shaping the melody in this. I really liked it a lot. Yeah.
Okay, on to the next one, a new release coming out at the beginning of May here by Lorenzo De Finti.
Yeah.
And he's got his quartet here on a new release, Mysterium Lunae. And this is on Lawson Records. And this is this quartet's third studio album. It features all original tunes here. They're credited both to De Finti and the bass player Stefano Daora. And De Finti began playing piano at a young age. I think he was like 5 years old or so. Then he continued to study piano, eventually going on to the Conservatory Giuseppe Verdi of Milan. And he also studied around internationally, also spent some time at Berkeley in Boston as well. So he's kind of on the international jazz scene. And here, as a member of his group, as I said, the other composer credited to these tunes, Stefano Daora on bass, a very unique sounding trumpet player and flugelhorn here, Alberto Mandarini. Now, Mandarini is a professor of jazz trumpet at the Conservatory of Verdi in Milan, so I imagine that's where they met. And he began a musical career at a young age. He was also a symphonic player in the RAI Symphony Orchestra of Turin and also the Orchestra Internazionale d'Italia and some others too. So he was a firm player in classical trumpet, which you can hear in his sound because there's this huge dark trumpet sound in there. And rounding out the group, Marco Castiglione on drums. So that's the quartet here. Now this album is a kind of more. There's some things I don't understand about this, and I'll get to it, which is in some of the sound production of it.
Yeah, I had some interesting comments about this too.
Yeah. We start out with the title track, Mysterium Lunae. This begins with like a rippling wave of piano figures, and then a warm and longing bass line.
Almost classical, really.
Yeah. To which Mandarini comes in on a legato melody on the trumpet, while cymbals subdivide underneath. The emphasis goes back to the bass line while the trumpet softens. And then next it builds up into a big theme with a rock beat and synthesized chords. Now, this is the really weird thing about this. I'm not sure where these chords are coming from. And I'll explain that more in a minute. The last track on this album is the same as this first track, but it's the studio video recorded version, which you can see on YouTube. And so it's almost like this. It's slightly different, but you'll notice that
it's not quite as Hollywood as this one is.
Yeah, De Finti is just playing acoustic piano, but it seems to me that the bassist is using some sort of effects throughout this album to get a sort of string ensemble and then some other tones. So I'm not sure about all the synthy sounds on this album, if they're overdubs on keyboard or whatever, because there's quite a lot of synthy kind of texture, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so much here. This rock beat comes in and these kind of synthesized chords build up. So I'm not sure if they're keyboard or somehow through a bass effect or whatnot. Anyway, a lighter section then features acoustic piano and then back to full-on playing with trumpet. It becomes sparse and intimate then for De Finti to solo delicately with a nice sense of touch. His attack gradually intensifies as his lines get speedier, And then the big backing builds up again with synth sounds and trumpet. Once again, it gets sparse for Mandolini to build up a trumpet solo. He also starts softly over little piano figures, and then it gets more animated. He has this huge but dark tone to the trumpet, very unique tonal characteristic. After the climax of his solo, it comes down softly, returning to the rippling piano figures from the beginning, and slows to a quiet end.
What the trumpet actually plays kind of put me in mind of a lot of the pop trumpet. Like I was thinking Chuck Mangione in his more pop phase, or Jerry Rafferty's song Baker Street. You know, that was a sax though, I think. But that sort of melody, it's sort of they're comfortable and they fit into like a pop. So that happens throughout the album too. I mean, it's kind of like I guess you'd call it a fusion album.
Yeah, it's got some. It has a lot of classical influence, but also like that kind of rock fusion kind of element in those sections in that tune where it builds up. The drummer gets a real kind of rock feeling going, and you get this huge denseness, almost like progressive rock kind of layers of sound that kind of like swell up. And there's some more things going on with the bass I mentioned as we go on. It gets this like otherworldly bass presence, like it's like the bass has become 10 feet tall or something.
It's descending from the ceiling.
Track 2 is called Mystery Clock. This one begins with a simple rhythmic piano figure that De Finti repeats and then starts to harmonize. I think here again there are synthy strings added, unless it's a very high bowed bass. It sounds more cello-like, though it says to be in the very high register. Then plucked bass and light drums join in on the pattern. Interestingly, it's a pattern of 9 beats. This is really a challenge to figure out what's going on here. It's seemingly a measure of 4 and then 5, but interesting rhythmic thing going on here. Mandolini joins in on trumpet. He works in unison with the bass line, which is kind of a cool effect. De Finti plays a sparse transition section to the next part that also has a trumpet line, and then it returns to the original figure to build up into a repeat of the trumpet and bass theme. It works into a piano solo section. There's a lot of space, and De Finti focuses on articulation and clear figures and runs. The time now in the solo section is a straight 4/4. Gets into a regular groove. There's some swirling string sounds added to the background here. Again, are they added later on with a keyboard, or is it a string effect? I'm not sure. Dalla Ora gets a bass solo over De Finti's rhythmic backing, and the 9-beat feel has returned again now. His sound is huge and round. And then after that,
big sound.
Mandolini gets a trumpet solo. The energy builds up with heavier drumming behind his lines. It starts to quiet down into a few of the original piano figures and some final soft trumpet lines.
I didn't get that nice like dipping my toes into the bass pool effect that you get from the organ pedal though.
Yeah.
I want a bass pool installed in my house.
Bass pool.
I'll have to invent it first.
It's a new idea. I like it.
Yeah, I'll have to invent it.
Track 3, Whispers from the End of the World. This one starts with very spaced out piano chords. Continue on till Mandolini joins in with long legato melody notes. I think he's on flugelhorn here, making his already fat sound practically obese. That's my line. This is an impossibly big trumpet sound this guy has. There's a kind of shimmering string line in the cello range. Is it that bass that's being bowed again with some effect? I'm not sure. Trumpet is out for the next section with delicate solo piano lines and bass adding pulses over light cymbal work. Dalla Ora has a bass solo feature next, getting some big bluesy licks that work into the upper register and then back down again. It's very groovy and melodic. Mandolini's next on flugelhorn, mixing flowing lines and cool interval ideas over the changing modal harmonies underneath. After some tinkling piano and a pause, it then returns to a sparse piano and flugelhorn theme with some bass bowing textures to softly finish it out. Track 4, Tiny Candle in the Storm, in parentheses, shining on us. Sounds like the water would extinguish it. But anyway.
You would think. But
sparse but densely voiced piano chords start this one. Trumpet and bass come in on a pickup to a slow melody, but there is busy drumming dividing the beat underneath. Mandarini plays the very legato theme, and De Finti adds punctuations underneath. There's a repeated high bass plucking figure with some effects that gets a bit hypnotic. I'm not sure, it's not, this is a manipulated tone, so it's hard to tell what quite is going on. But Mandarini works over this kind of very rhythmic thing into a frenzy of a solo with lots of chromatic ideas mixed in. Piano chords, drumming, and more synthy sounds come in as it builds and builds. Eventually, it deflates, just kind of into a quiet start for a piano solo. De Finti plays interesting, fleeting but rhythmic lines, builds his solo back into a return of a section of the trumpet theme. Then it comes down quickly again into a bowed bass section that builds up as Mandarini joins in with other synthy backing and tense drumming. That gives way to some solo bass plucking with a lot of reverb over piano chords, and then some kind of cosmic wind sound that blows through to the end.
That cosmic wind, so familiar to us from so many recordings.
Either that or it sounds like an effector pedal with lots of background noise through an amp.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is, but it's a sound there.
Cosmic wind.
Now, track 5. I'm not sure how we read this one. Minuio Eni
Arfent. I don't know what language that is.
I don't know what it means.
It could be a dialect. I'm not sure,
could
though.
Be.
I can't really tell.
Where
are they from? They're from Sardinia or no?
No, I'm not sure where.
I don't know.
It
could be it. I don't know.
Yeah. All I know is he studied in Milan. So.
Okay. Well, that's not from that area.
This one begins with a rhythmic piano part and a bowed bass melody. It sounds like a lullaby with a skip in it. Like the baby's bottle was spiked with some vodka or something. I couldn't figure out the meter actually, but the piano figure is like in alternating 5 and then 7 beat phrases. It could be as I went on to listen, I thought it might be just like a oddly accented 12/8, because that's what it sort of works into later.
Okay.
But it's got this lullaby quality, but then
with a hiccup at the end.
Hiccup in it. Yeah, the baby's got hiccups basically. The trumpet joins with a counterline to this, to the bass melody, and then it shifts to the focus on the trumpet. The rhythm stops under the long trumpet lines. Next is a solo piano section. Has more even slow 3-beat feel to it. So maybe the previous section is actually subdivided 12, as I said, with odd accents. The piano builds up into some percussive chords. Then it returns to the rhythmic patterns with the return of Mandarini for a trumpet solo. And after that, it quiets down for some bass bowing, working together with the trumpet over the rhythmic piano that suddenly takes a strange harmonic twist, a real twist, and then it fades away. So it takes you out of that lullaby into some nightmarish things that might happen, but you don't get to see where they go. And then the final track is the Mysterium Lunae video edition. So it's another version of the title track, but this is studio live version. So if you want to, you can hear this one in CD fidelity while you watch the YouTube and see the actual performance of it. Overall, it's a bit produced for something that I would usually pick for the show, but I enjoyed it. It's excellent musicianship and good interplay. Interesting ideas for changing up rhythmic meters and feels again. I was kind of intrigued by Mandarini with this, one of the fattest trumpet sounds I've heard. And he has really... I
think that's the recording, though. I don't think it's really...
I don't know. I looked at his equipment. He's got one of these, like, huge, like, one-piece, these new kind of mouthpieces that trumpet players use these days. And I liked his solo ideas and flawless technique. The bass on this is a little bit the tonal manipulations and things make it larger than life. It's sort of like the god of bass has emerged from the recording with some of the reverb and things. But yeah, it's kind of cool. It all works. He has
bestowed his bass gifts on us.
Yeah, but I liked it. It was this warm, glowing sound. I mean, I like De Finti's piano playing as well. It's got a nicely articulated touch, and there's some interesting compositions. It's going for something, not traditional jazz, but incorporating some classical background and other things. So, yeah, there's a variety in the jazz thing. It's an exciting group. They get a lot of big sound out of just 4 people playing. So,
yeah, it's got a lot of production on it, and that. It wasn't bad. I mean, I didn't think it was too much production. I remember a few weeks ago we heard one. I thought it was just way overproduced because everything just sounded like it was really shiny. And
the Latin one,
chrome. Yeah, I don't know. This one wasn't quite like that. It was kind of I called it fusion. It kind of gets close to New Age a lot of times, but when I think of New Age music, I think of it as music that has a total lack of conflict in it. That's not the case here. This music has little anthills of tension that are completely dispelled by the warm, reassuring playing. Mm-hmm. And again, I mentioned Chuck Mangione. I thought about him and his crossover music from the 70s.
Right.
It has that kind of vibe to it. It gives there are some tricky rhythms, as you said, in it too. The album as a whole gives a sense that all is right with the world and healing is happening as we speak, and the album is harmonically and melodically reassuring. I didn't dislike it, but I mean, it's not something I'm gonna really go for. I don't like to be too reassured. I don't know what's going on out there.
All right.
So if you want something reassuring, this would be a good one, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's not bad. It's just a little different. Produced more.
Yeah. Productions like this in jazz kind of put me off a bit,
right.
But
Well, we're going to go all organic for the last one here, and we'll save the elder statesman of European piano, maybe in general for the jazz world. This is the great Enrico Pieranunzi.
Yeah.
And, well, I'll get to his compatriots here, but he's the nameplate on this from Storyville Records with Something Tomorrow. This just came out May 6th.
The name of the album is Something Tomorrow, I should mention. Yeah.
It just came out May 6th. And Pieranunzi's been on our podcast before, actually. Episode 1, going all the way back to when we started. I heard this last recording. On our Hello World first recording. That was The Real You on Stunt Records. Yeah, was that with Fonsbach too?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was with
Bill
Fonsbach,
Evans' music.
the bass player here, Danish bass player, fabulous player. And then we did another Pieranunzi in episode 2, and that was Afterglow with Bert Joris.
Yeah.
And here he is out again this year in a trio format, again with Thomas Fonsbach on bass, a fabulous Danish bass player. We heard
they play so well together, really, too.
They
the
do.
Ensemble's fantastic.
Yeah. We heard him with what's her name? Sin Eeg or
Sin
something?
Eeg, yeah. That was fantastic,
very
too.
nice vocalist, yeah. Lovely voice. Seems like a lovely woman. But here, they're in trio format, so we get some drums here, and we've got French drummer Andre.
Yeah, Ceccarelli, I think.
Ceccarelli?
Double
just
C.
2 C's?
Yeah.
Ceccarelli.
Yeah, it's like a K.
Yeah, okay. French and Italian fusion name there. Anyway, nice trio thing here that works out. This is just beautiful. So Pieranunzi,
this is a great record all the way through. I'll just say right at the beginning.
He's one of the most well-known European jazz pianists. He's got a really interesting combination of influences on his playing. You can hear a lot of Bill Evans in his style. He did a lot of collaborations with Morricone, the film composer, played with Chet Baker, Lee Konitz, so he got known to American audiences. So he's a big name, and deservedly so.
There's a bit of a classical influence to his playing,
classical
too,
influence,
which I like. It gives it gives his playing a lot of class.
Yeah, Fantastique has played with him a lot, and himself has played with Mani Alexander, as we mentioned, Sieg, and others. And the drummer here, Ceccato, is big name on European jazz scene. He's played with Piernunzi before. Also Enrico Rava, Chick Corea, and with pop stars too, Sting, Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner. So he's a versatile drummer. Very nice, subtle drummer, I should say, too. Rounds out this trio really nicely. And what's really nice here is we've got almost all original compositions for this program. We've got one jazz standard. This is just, how can I say, mature artists playing with no forced effort at all. The music just comes out on this album, and anyone who even slightly likes jazz is going to find this album really beautiful.
Yeah, I love this.
This is nice.
This is going right into the CD collection.
Yeah, I'm going to get this one too. We've got mostly Piernunzi compositions here. We do have one Fantastique and one Kurt Weill and Ira Gershwin tune. So mostly Piernunzi, as is the first track called Those Days. Piernunzi starts it out with a rubato intro, very light touch, just enough hesitation to pull you in. Bass and drums join in with a medium, even beat tempo, lightly subdivided by Ceccarelli's snare brushwork for the piano to go through the lovely melody. Fantastique warm and round bass adds a nice pulse, fills in the gap between the piano melody lines. Fantastique also has a heartfelt melodic solo after Piernunzi's short but subtle solo. They work around the melody again, and it slows to an ending with a happy major chord and a few more moving chords. It's a very pretty opening piece. As they play in this trio, and with his originals tunes, the lines between like where the melody and Piernunzi's solo playing begin or end are not so clear. It's oftentimes his solo just evolves as part of the melody, and it's always extremely melodic anyway. So, and he's not a player who needs to show off at all. So it just, sometimes the solo just becomes like an extended melodic development of the melody idea, I found. So it's sort of flexible in the way that they structure the pieces. Track 2 is another Piernunzi original, Perspectives. This was a swinging, syncopated chords and a one-note bass line that build up tension of the intro in this one. You know, that dung, 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 the bass waiting for something to change. There's nice chord work getting a groove going by Piernunzi on the piece. This one's all more about chords and groove than a real melody. There's not a lot of melody that develops. It's kind of a chordal thing that's going on. Ceccarelli is there with him on all the hits, on the accents, which is nice. He's listening very carefully. It moves right into a bouncy bass solo from Fantastique. Then Piernunzi is next with a nice run into his solo that features lots of cool rhythmic ideas, turning and tumbling lines. And Fantastique's groove underneath is really driving. He's a very supporting bass player to what soloists are doing. They play around with rhythmic ideas and accents to make an interesting ending to this piece. Track 3, another Piernunzi, Wave of Interest. This is a rhythmically fun piece. It's a swinging 6/8 waltz that seems to have other longer phrases of 8 thrown in places to stretch it out. Piernunzi's phrasing and trickling notes are very tasty, and when his solo comes around, it actually moves into a regular driving 6/8 swing throughout the solo. Listen to his action-packed left hand under the rapid melody phrases, along with some nice tom fills on the drums underneath. And then Fantastique gets an exciting solo full of rhythmic fun too. Huge tone, clean attacks, and they all wrap it back into the melody for a fun ending to this piece. Really intense locked-in rhythms and good interplay. Track 4, another Piranesi, The Heart of a Child. This is a slow waltzing ballad with a pretty melody. Piranesi shows off his light and clear touch with a little high trickling answering phrases to himself. So he's doing a kind of call and response thing, just in his own phrasing. Ceccato, very tasty with little brush textures underneath on the snare and cymbal. So he's like just scrubbing out these little tasty things in between the phrases. Then Fonsbach, another yearning melodic solo here. It really sings out of the bass. This guy can really make the bass kind of like, it's like almost like an opera singer on the stage, just opening up.
Yeah, it's a very melodic vocal quality. Very nice.
Piranesi then takes back the melody after the bass solo, a little more gentle than before, and they walk it into a nice, pretty ending. Another Piranesi, track 5, Something Tomorrow, the title. This is kind of an energetic samba tune. Nice work with Piranesi's left hand and Fonsbach's bass joining together with a cool syncopated rhythmic movement against the melody that's happening above. Piranesi is one of these guys. His hands are completely disconnected from each other. They're operating by different parts of the brain. They're completely independent.
Right. I love that when pianists can do that.
Yeah, he's really great at that. It's a very happy sounding tune, and then Piranesi takes it through a samba solo over pulsing this samba ba ba bum ba bum ba bum. Listen to the driving bass that Fonsbach has going. What's really cool, though, is after a little syncopated riff section that plays off from part of the melody, it switches up to swing. And so then Fonsbach walking, and the cymbal rhythm is changed. Now it's a fast swing, and so Piranesi just goes off on that into the swinging section. Comes back around to Fonsbach solo on bass, and it stays in the swing, and they swing that back into the melody again. This is a super fun tune. Just so much positive energy. Really makes you feel good. Track 6. Now we're going to go to the only Fonsbach composition here, What Once Was. A medium slow ballad that has a 12/8 feel to it. Piranesi shows a very soft touch on the melody before he passes a long section of it off to Fonsbach to make the bass just sings out the melody. He really makes that tone cry out. It has some interesting chord changes in the progression under the melody. It's kind of interesting. Piranesi comes back. Some nice improvisations around that melody. Like I say, his division between when he's really soloing or just expanding on the melody are not so clear on all of these pieces. They're just nice. They just fit the music. The subtle rhythmic flow of his hands, bringing out the pulse in the meter, is also wonderful. As I said, this is a 4-beat, but it's a 12/8, meaning that each beat is divided into 3. Da, 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 da. Like, if you listen to how he draws out the melody, you'll feel that underlying pulse even in just his hands on the piano, which is, it's a real attention to rhythmic detail. Very nice phrasing. And then they bring it to a soft and lovely ending. Track 7, 3 Notes, another Piranesi composition. As advertised, it's composed of 2 groups of 3 notes. And they're couched inside of syncopated phrases that make the basis for this kind of fun and swinging rhythmic tunes melody. Great brushwork on the drums here, and Piranesi's solo is supercharged with rhythmic playfulness. Fonsbach works a fast-walking bass line in between, also adding in syncopated patterns. Then he gets his own rhythmic masterpiece of a solo on this one. Piranesi isn't done yet, and he comes back for some more bursting solo ideas before working back into the 3-note theme idea to wrap it up. Lots of fun on this one, too. Rhythmic playground here with skillful, agile players. Tune 8, Suspension Points, Pier Nunzi. Now, this is a really nice tune that sort of breaks up what's been going on. It starts out with these rubato ringing piano phrases, cymbal washes, long bass notes that make waves of music, and it floats this whole tune without a tempo along as harmonies shift around the repeated notes of Pier Nunzi. So these, I think, suspension points are these notes that you'll hear repeated. Well, the harmonies shift around them as like kind of these pedal tones that just stick between the different harmonic shifts. So they're so rhythmically tight on all of the other swinging tunes on this album that this one sort of amorphously flows through is a nice, interesting contrast to all those, I thought. Really pretty and flowing piece of music. And then, what is a French title doing?
Je ne sais quoi.
What is that je ne sais quoi, that unspeakable quality about this tune?
That I don't know what.
Yeah. But you'll know if you listen to it because it's another fun tune. Here.
You know what bugs me about this? When Americans talk, they'll say, oh, she has a certain je ne sais quoi, which literally means I don't know what. Why don't they just say she has an I don't know what? What did I got to say the French term?
Yeah, she's got a nice personality. This one, I can tell you exactly what it has. It's got a long solo intro with trickling piano figures and rubato chords that work into a chugging waltz tempo. Yeah, it moves right along, joined by bass and drums, but Pier Nunzi gets that going, and they can't help but fall in on this minor melody that's got a lot of harmonic twists to it, too. Lots of forward motion in the rhythm. Fonsbach, another tasty solo, and Pier Nunzi working on some rhythmic magic interplay between his hands. What's he doing with his hands? You got to listen to this guy. His hands are both able to do anything independently. Great piano solo here. Go back waltzing into the melody again. When you think it's slowing down to an end, there's an unexpected modulation that extends into a little ending phrase, and finally some piano trickles to end it up. Really fun. What it's got is rhythm. And speaking of having rhythm, Ira Gershwin, Kurt Real, This Is New. That's the name of the song.
I didn't know this tune before.
It's kind of a jazz standard.
Songs, yeah.
Playful and pretty. Intro from Pier Nunzi. Some amazing runs thrown in there too. He gets a rhythmic swinging groove going, and the bass and drums join right in. Pier Nunzi shows off his rhythmic and melodic mastery in his solo here. Fonsbach has an exciting solo as well. And finally we get a drum solo here.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a surprise, too.
Yeah. Even if it's broken up by trading eights only with Pier Nunzi. They come back swinging through the melody, and they have a little fun at the end of the tune. So what can you say? It's effortless mastery, fabulous trio interplay, tight swinging, melodic ideas, interesting original compositions, all coming together without any need to force or overplay anything. Any one of these tunes could continue on for double the length, and you'd still be just as interested and entertained.
Yeah, so much stylish playing, great ideas. Wow.
This is mainstream jazz as its highest level presented to us Americans by European masters. So there you have it. Just a great recording.
Okay, when we say adult music, this is what we mean. Everybody should be listening to music like this. It was so good. It makes life feel good, even though it's not. I accept this one.
Yes.
I accept their uplifting of my feeling here. This was really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, really right nice into recording. The CD collection. I will have this when it comes out on CD this Friday, in fact, May 20th.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
it's not out yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a keeper. Yeah. It's out on only streaming so far.
So there you have it. Piano Paisans. Lots of good keyboard work here coming from Italy, as most of the music coming out of there on any genre?
These days, the jazz scene was a real big surprise for me there, and it's really, really good. They've also become like great period instrument players as well. Like in the 80s and 90s, they were still doing that large orchestra of Vivaldi. Well, England was doing all the English ensembles were doing all the period instrument work, but now they've picked up on that, and they really give it a real panache, like a great melodic flavor. All great. I really love it. Yeah,
good stuff here. All on episode 63 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And I think we know what we're going to do next week. We're going to have a kind of...
we're going to go on from Piranuzzi here and do some more trios, aren't we?
All trios.
Well, almost all trios. My first one isn't a trio, but two of them are. So. Okay.
I've got trios with a couple guests, and what I've done is, obviously in jazz, sort of the standard is the piano trio. But since we've done it today and previous episodes, we've had a lot of piano stuff. It's going to be non-piano trios. So
that's okay. I'll have a piano trio.
I've got for you a flamenco. I've got a sax-based trio with no piano, and our favorite, the organ trio.
Oh, fantastic!
Got a new organ trio too. So, all non-piano trios for next week, and a mixture of styles too. It should mix it up from kind of classic jazz, some new style flamenco jazz, and then some soul jazz too. So it should be a good time.
Yeah, so I've got a few traditional and non-traditional trios, all unknown composers. So tune in or give us a listen, and we'll hear some new names.
Clean your ears.
New old names. Some of them will be new names.
Get ready for some new music. That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, so that's what we'll be back for episode 64. Be sure to check on Deezer or on the Facebook page. We'll get that playlist up early if you want to check out the tunes before next week's episode. And before we go, I want to say thanks again to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. The eye catcher. I hope it's caught some people's eyes on these new platforms, Samsung and others.
I hope people are picking up the irony too, and not thinking that we're a porno podcast or anything like that.
Severely disappointed.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got a plan for next week, and we've got a lot of good music coming up in future episodes. And until we see you for episode 64, take care and keep listening.